This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at Kevin Kautzman and at Brad Kelly. All right, we're back with another action-packed, fun-filled episode of the podcast about the dark side of creative people who've all died. We're not doing anybody who's alive, and the rule is it's a year and a day before we touch anybody, but we got a good one today. I'm really excited. This is Art of Darkness.
I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, and I am Kevin Kautzman with my good friend and co-conspirator, Brad Kelly. Brad, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. Swinging. This is going to be a good one. I've had a lot of fun researching this. This podcast takes me down rabbit holes I wouldn't dive into otherwise. And here we are. So today one of the things about Art of Darkness too is that we like to mix it up. We like to play the hits, and we also like to bring you people you might not know about otherwise. But this, I think, falls into the category of the hits.
Definitely. Yeah.
And Brad, I tell you what, man, you should have took care of me. I could have been a contender. I could have been hey, Stella! Give me your best Stella, Brad.
Stella!
So we're going to do that again at the end of the episode and see if we can get any of the magic of the great,
we can live into it. Yeah.
Late, singular Marlon Brando.
Yeah. Really, truly one of the great ones. Been watching I've seen a handful of the films he's been in, and then just kind of watching some YouTube clips over the last day or so. Yeah, powerhouse actor. This
episode's going to really dovetail well, I think, into the Tennessee Williams episode, because of course it was Streetcar that really launched Brando into the stratosphere. So you can always go back into our archive at artofdarkpod.com, check out the Tennessee episode, but don't pause this one because no spoilers. You're gonna, the one's gonna complement the other. These are evergreen episodes. And I'm really excited about this. I have a theater background, and I'm very interested in film, and so I really can't wait to dig into it. I have, for references, I am gonna dip in and out of the Wikipedia and then some different articles online. I found 3 books about Brando at the library, and the one that I'm really gonna use is Brando's Songs My Mother Taught Me, which is the biography, the autobiography he wrote himself. So
excellent. Cool.
Yeah, he wrote it with Robert Lindsay. I believe it came out in 1994. Well, before I go any further, Brad, what do you know about Marlon Brando? We always start with that question.
Sure, yeah. Marlon Brando, great American actor, career spanning several decades with a number of iconic roles. From Streetcar Named Desire, On the Waterfront, The Godfather,
make him an offer he can't refuse.
Yeah.
What's better than that? Better than that? There's nothing better.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. And Apocalypse Now.
The horror.
Yeah. Known for being the rare combination of a heartthrob and an eccentric. Which I don't know how many other people fit into both those categories at the same time.
Eccentric is too mild a word. We need a new word. This is we'll get into it.
Yeah. So kind of ended his career, sort of waning career, and a little bit of dissolution, you might say. Seemed to have adopted the sort of Orson Welles archetype of just getting sort of heavy and
corpulent
toward the end. Yeah, corpulent.
That is so funny that you said that. I had that exact same thought just now. I was thinking, Mm-hmm.
So, but other than that, I guess I kind of know what the average film fan knows, I guess. So
yeah. Great. Okay. Well, how much do you think they offered him to write his autobiography in the early 90s? How much do you think they offered?
$5 million.
You nailed it. You nailed
Really?
it. That's exactly what? What?
I've been paying a lot of attention to the publishing world lately.
Brad Kelly is the book whisperer. Holy moly. You just picked that. I am a strong sender.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, I felt the vibes. So.
You probably picked that up. But you're right. That's what he claimed that they offered him. There's an interview with the late Marlon Brando. When I say late Brando, I'm really going to refer to early Brando and late Brando. And the break
that seems fair.
Is in the 70s. It's when he moved to the island near Tahiti is really when late Brando germinated, gestated. Yeah. I'm going to break this into 3 parts, like a play, and that's the structure I've chosen for this. I think it's appropriate, or a movie. 3 acts. So the first act is going to be his childhood. Then we're going to talk about his life in the theater, and then and in New York, and then we're going to talk about film and fame. So we're really going to get into it.
Cool. Good.
Yeah, awesome. So fantastic. So let's just start right at the beginning. He was born in 1924 in Nebraska. I want to make sure I get this right. Yeah, he was born on April 3rd in Omaha, Nebraska. To his father. Well, he was nicknamed Bud, and he was technically Marlon Brando Jr. It's funny, on the Wikipedia, his father was Marlon Brando, a pesticide and chemical feed manufacturer.
Yes.
Yes.
Auspicious beginnings.
Indeed. Yeah. Not a blue check father.
Sure.
And then his mother was named Dorothy Pennebaker. He had 2 elder sisters. They're sort of Euromutts, German, Dutch, English, Irish. An old American family. They arrived in the early 1700s, and then on the other side arrived in 1660. He was raised as a Christian Scientist.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Although he would later effectively adopt Judaism. He became very, very interested in sort of Judaism and Jewish New York. I think it was Stella Adler, his teacher, who was one of the progenitors of the method, which we'll get into. They almost sort of like adopted him as an honorary Jew. He to the point where he effectively knew Yiddish. Wow. It's an interesting part of his history that I'm not familiar with, and we'll get into it. Now, Brando had a really difficult upbringing. It was not easy. Here's a quote from the book here. His parents were both alcoholics. The anguish that her drinking produced was that she preferred getting drunk to caring for us. So an alcoholic mother. The parents eventually joined AA. Brando really disliked his father, and his father kind of really disliked him. So here's another quote. I was his namesake, but nothing I did ever pleased or even interested him. He enjoyed telling me I couldn't do anything right. He had a habit of telling me I would never amount to anything. So in 1930, right, this is Art of Darkness, so we're going to get into the dark stuff. That's one thing about Brando. There's no dearth of that. We're not going to have any trouble finding it. That's where the genius comes from, really. Well, around 1930, the parents moved to Evanston, Illinois. His father's work took him to Chicago, and then they separated when Brando was around 11. I have a quote here, or a passage from the autobiography I want to read. This is Brando. My mother's drinking got worse in Evanston. Sometimes alcohol sent her into a crying jag, but initially it usually made her happy, giddy, and full of mirth. And she might sit down at the piano and sing to herself, and we often joined in. But she was seldom home. With Ermi gone, I was alone a lot, and it was shortly after this that I found myself behaving in odd ways. I was failing in school. I was truant. I became a vandal and trashed houses that were being renovated. I shot birds, burned insects, slashed tires, and stole money. At the same time, I began finding myself not wanting to go home and spent most of my time at the house of Jimmy Ferguson, a classmate and longtime friend, or at the house of a Greek family who lived up the block and across the alley. I also began to stammer so noticeably that I was taken to Northwestern University for speech therapy, where I was treated unsuccessfully. With my BB gun, I accidentally shot a chauffeur, and I also shot the big bay window in our house and cracked it, which brought a ferocious reaction from my father. So troubled,
angry young man, troubled.
Angry young man, absolutely. I mean, so I think we can start to paint a picture of what we're dealing with here. I have an article from GQ magazine talking a little further about his relationship to his father. It says here, Brando loathed his father. It was a hatred that frothed and boiled underneath his skin like only bad blood between relatives can. And this is going to be a theme in his life because Brando had many children by numerous different women, and it did not end well for at least two of them. We'll get to it. This is a case of no amount of money, no amount of fame will prevent real horror from visiting you in life. And Brando's a very good case of that. So
yeah, man, we're seeing a little bit of a theme here with this in the Cash episode where, dads and prospective dads out there, you should just every once in a while encourage your kid. Every once in a while say, hey, that was pretty good,
Hey, good job. Hey, I like that film.
Unless you want them to be like a one-of-a-kind artist, then I don't know. Maybe you should treat them like crap. I don't know.
I just don't know. I think there has to be some sort of a balance there. But
yeah,
to give you an idea of how much vitriol he carried throughout his life for his father. When his first son was born, he said, this would be many years later, I'm jumping around, but he said, I didn't want my father to get near Christian. The day he was born, I said to myself with tears in my eyes, my father is never going to come near that child because of the damage he has done to me.
Wow.
Yeah, brutal. And
that's, that's one thing a kid who got kicked around, one way they can get revenge, right, is just deny them the lineage, basically.
Yes. Well, later, and there's an anecdote I'll get to, I think, later, but he would keep his father around, and ultimately he would forgive his father in his heart. I don't know if in his lifetime if they ever had like a serious reconciliation. But his father at one point had an affair with one of his secretaries after he had achieved fame. He had an affair with one of Brando's secretaries. We're not dealing with the most, emotionally stable people here.
Yeah. Jeez.
Well, so Brando was having a lot of trouble in school. This is another interesting one too, because like Kubrick, here we have somebody who's really not excelling at school, although Kubrick was less of a difficult young man. I'm going to read some more from the autobiography. At Libertyville High, I was a bad student, chronic truant, and all-around incorrigible. I was forever being sent to the principal's office to be disciplined. Mr. Underbrink didn't like me much and seated behind his big wooden desk with a stern, worn look on his face. He gave me one lecture after another. My homeroom teacher, Mr. Russell, was just as enraged by my contempt for authority, and his response was to belittle me. Once he lost his temper and shook me as hard as he could and announced to the class that I had an IQ of 90 and that I had better pay attention if I wanted to keep up with the rest of the class. I didn't try hard because I was bored and irritated. He had to repeat his sophomore year.
Wow.
He said he always had friends, but the parents treated him like he was poison. He was anathema to the teachers. This is interesting. Though I didn't realize it then, I was beginning to discover one of the realities of life. Members of almost every group in human society try hard to convince themselves that they are superior to the other groups, whether they are religions, nations, neighboring tribes in the rainforest, or members of rival suburban country clubs who claim that membership in their club proves they have a higher social standing than those in others. The caste system may be more highly developed in countries like India or England, but every tier of society and almost every culture tries to dominate a group it perceives as beneath it. In Libertyville, I was in the caste right near the bottom. So he would draw on these experiences later throughout his body of work, and it's all on celluloid, and we get to enjoy it. I'm laying the groundwork here to talk a little more deeply about some of the films that we're going to get to that are maybe even a little more obscure than the ones everyone knows.
Okay, yeah.
There's a Minnesota connection here, which I think is fun. So I'm reading again from the bio. My father's solution to my difficulties at Libertyville High was to send me to the same school he had once attended, Shattuck Military Academy in Faribault, Minnesota. He thought that discipline would benefit me greatly. My tenure at Shattuck was probably fated from the beginning to be short. By then I was rebelling against any authority and against any conformity in general with every ounce of energy in my body.
Does that ever work for some kids?
How do you mean?
Like, does it work where, like, you know what, that kid just needs some discipline, and then you send them and they get it and it works?
It probably does break certain types.
Yeah.
If you don't have like an artistic streak in your body and you just go, you know what, I'm going to join and there's nothing wrong with this per se, but now I'm going to go into the military now. I'm going to try to become an officer, or I'm going to go work in sales. I mean, not everybody has the cojones that somebody like Brando did, because he would then promptly from here go on to his career with a little interlude, and we're getting ahead of the next passage. I'll read it. So now you have to understand too, I want to make sure I'm getting the years right here. He was born in 24. So what does that put him right up against? World
War II.
The big one, the big kahuna, the big daddy. And how did he avoid it? At the induction center, a doctor asked me if I had any physical problems. Sometimes my knee bothers me a little, I said. I'd injured it in a football scrimmage at Shattuck when someone tackled me from behind and snapped the semilunar cartilage, which had been removed. The doctor grabbed my leg and pulled it sideways, causing my knee to spin a little like a ball in a socket. Oof. Sorry, son. You've got a trick knee, he said. You're 4F.
Ooh, okay. Okay.
Dodged a bullet.
Yeah, for real. Thanks, guy who tackled me from behind.
Right. Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, right. Lucy pulled the football away, and Charlie Brown doesn't have to go and Garrett the Krauts in the trenches or whatever it is.
Right.
That was more World War I, but yeah.
Point stands.
All right. Yeah, exactly. You didn't have to go face the tanks.
Yeah.
Well, so here we are. Now we're kind of coming up to the end of Act One. There is a friendship that I have to mention here. When he was in Illinois, he made friends with a fellow named Wally Cox. And I'll read a little bit about Wally. Brando, who was called Bud at this point, was a mimic from his youth. He developed an ability to absorb the mannerisms of children he played with and display them dramatically while staying in character. Around that time, when he was younger, he was introduced to neighborhood boy Wally Cox, and the two were very close friends, and they would remain close friends for decades. I just want to introduce Wally as a character because Wally's going to be his roommate, and they will stay in touch for decades. So, all right. So he's 4F. Let's put ourselves in time here. We're in the early 40s, boy from Omaha, bit of a stutter, alcoholic parents, total truant, had to redo his sophomore year, sent to a military academy. And my parents bravely sat me down and asked what I was going to do now. This is the eternal problem, right?
Yeah.
What are we going to do with this young man? What is he going to do? I don't know, I said, but I had a few ideas. The previous Christmas, I'd visited my sisters in New York, and afterward, I wrote, Franny, I like New York, and I'm going to live there when I start living. God, I wish I were there. It is the most fascinating town in the world. He's not wrong.
Yeah.
My mother said it was important for me to decide what I wanted to do with my life. And my father, right, I love this. You're 17, you're 18 years old. Got to figure out what you're going to do with your life.
Right.
And my father offered to pay for my education to learn a trade. Since the only thing I had ever done except sports that anyone had praised me for was acting, I told him, why don't I go to New York and try to be an actor? Ha ha.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. All right. So it's a story as old as time, right?
Yeah.
Got this young man, and he's going to go make it in the big city. And so we've got to really kind of put ourselves there. He arrives in New York City. He went to his sister's apartment in Greenwich Village, spring of 1943, in a red fedora, and he thought he was going to knock everybody dead.
Right.
It was just going to be Marlon Brando's town.
Right.
It took him a while, but eventually it was true, which is quite funny.
Sure. Right.
He writes about getting drunk for the first time in Washington Square. He talks about going to Brooklyn and a party. And then this is funny. This is a good story. So I'll tell this anecdote. One afternoon this is Brando. One afternoon I went to a cafeteria on 4th Street and 7th Avenue and sat down beside two men. When we started talking, one man spoke with a thick Texas accent. And I asked him where he was from. New York, he said. How did you get that Texas accent? I asked. I was in the Army. But why would you get a Texas accent in the Army? I'm sure I had a look of puzzlement on my face. It was protective coloration, he said, because if you were a Jew in the Army, they called you all kinds of names, teased you, and made it hard on you. So I pretended to be a Texan. He said he had been out of the Army for about 8 months, but still hadn't broken the habit. Then we introduced ourselves. He told me his name was Norman Mailer, and the other man said he was Jimmy Baldwin. So he meets Norman Mailer, who's unpublished, and James Baldwin, and he's now beginning to move, in a very urbane milieu around Kubrick time too. So we can kind of put ourselves. We want to go check out the Kubrick episode. That was quite a deep dive, I think. Yeah. And we're right here in this war period, and Brando begins to move in these, I guess, what you would call ethnic circles, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a theme that would move throughout his entire life and career. He was an earnest advocate of civil rights, and he would later famously be a very strong advocate of Indian rights, right. Native American rights. We're going to listen to one piece of audio here during the middle of this podcast, and that's going to relate directly to that. Okay. So Brando was, while abnormally empathetic toward minorities, and probably because he himself identified with the outsider. And
I would think you come to New York and you don't necessarily relate to maybe the more waspy contingent either, right? It's like, well, I'm not those people. My dad sold pesticide in Nebraska. Like, yeah, interesting.
We're going to have to get into Brando's sexuality during this podcast, and it's going to be it's going to be pretty rich because Brando was definitely bisexual, and if Brando were a woman, and I'm going to be an equal opportunity offender here, Brando was a whore. He was. Brando was whorish. He was probably a sex addict. You could
really?
But he had the looks, and then eventually the fame and the money to kind of back it up. Though of course it didn't necessarily end well for all of the children. And I want to be sensitive here too. This is a sensitive topic, but you cannot divorce sex and sexuality from Brando's identity and even his screen presence and what he was renowned for. The whole point of Streetcar was that sort of raw, horrible sexuality at the heart of Stanley's character. And of course, it's a play that features a rape at the center of it.
Right.
So there's a funny story. And Brando, he had no hesitation. He'd screw your wife. He'd screw your girlfriend. And then he would sort of just chuckle about it. He didn't feel any guilt or any very, very odd, unusual. But I think it comes from that rebellion, because there are few ways in America to rebel harder than to have that sexuality.
That's true. Yeah.
The list of people that he slept with is like an A-list of celebrities at the time.
That's wild.
He got with Marilyn.
Yeah.
Okay. This is later, getting ahead of things. He and James Dean had a thing. And then famously later, Richard Pryor.
I heard that. Yeah.
Joey Diaz talks about that on Rogan and talks about how when that came out, how all the Italians in New Jersey had to go and burn all the Godfather DVDs. They were losing it.
But here's the James Dean one. If somebody had the tape of that, that would be worth. That would be worth some dough.
We're going to get into that. I'm getting a little out of order here because he's still a baby New Yorker. But here's the story. In the apartment next to my sister's lived a woman named Estrelita Rosa Maria Consuelo Cruz.
Whoa!
I called her Luke.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, as you do. She was Colombian and 10 or 15 years older than me. She was olive-skinned, fetching, extremely artistic, and a great cook. Her husband was overseas with the Marines, and one night she invited me for dinner. There was a fireplace, candlelight, and wine, and I lost my virginity. Luke was extremely passionate and sexually unconventional. She never wore underpants. And we'd often walk down a street in New York, duck in an alley, and have at it.
Wow.
At the ballet one night, she put her hand down my pants, and I put my hand up her skirt. And she yipped and tittered so loudly that others in the audience must have wondered about her. After her husband came back from overseas, he learned about our affair and divorced her. Our friendship lasted many years. She was very important to me then, but after her, there were many other women in my life. So, he's in New York City. He's a boy from Omaha. He's a 10. He's handsome. He's fit. Yeah. He's got an accent. He's probably got big puppy eyes. He's naive, and he's troubled. Catnip.
Right. Yeah,
Catnip.
Absolutely.
Now, this is interesting. I want to make sure I get through the theater. Yeah, I'll this is important to read. This is good stuff. So he's enjoying his freedom, but he writes a letter home in the fall, and this is the letter home. He would go to the new school for a period. School starts tomorrow, and I'm very, very glad because I've been plenty antsy for a long time. Oh, he absolutely struggled with depression, anxiety, very seriously, to the point where he would have a breakdown doing Streetcar, and he would have a relationship with psychiatrists for most of his life. He would see different therapists. The method, I think, you know what method acting is?
Yeah, I mean, method acting, the sort of stereotype is it's when you hear stories about actors who never break character until the film's over, that's sort of a cartoonish representation of it. But I guess on the practical level, I don't know. But it's basically you live the character.
I think that's a fair summary.
What does Robert Downey Jr.'s character say in Tropic Thunder? I don't drop character until they release the DVD commentary.
That's such a funny movie, man. I might rewatch that. I've been watching all the Brando stuff, and yeah. So it comes from Stella Adler, and it says here the technique is founded on an actor's ability to imagine a character's world. Her technique encourages the actors to expand their understanding of the world in order to create compelling performances. So we'll get into that a little further. But for now, so he's writing his parents. He's got anxiety. He's saying, I've been plenty antsy for a long time. What with bitter bus drivers, pacifists, philosophers, kooks, funny people, New York, and myself. New York.
Yeah.
Nothing changes.
Yeah.
Oh God, round and round I go looking for an answer of some kind. No answer, no nothing. I've tried relaxing, but it's still the same. I've gone nuts thinking about truth and its aspects. I don't get anything. Nothing adds up. There is so damn much bitterness and fear and hate and untruths all around me. I want to do something about it. It makes me mad when I get scared of sticking my neck out. If you try to be good and thoughtful and kind and truthful, people call you a liar and suspect you and resent you and hate you. That's that Midwestern credulity when it comes face to face with the sort of bitter, tough edge of New York City. There are all these rules that you aren't aware of. Right. And he would point out that it would have a lot to do with, he would, this is where he really began to encounter Jewish people in New York. We'll get to it. I try my damnedest to understand and forgive, but if I were to put into words and actions what I sometimes feel, it would cost me my life almost. Society won't let you be decent because they're so goddamned afraid all the time. I've tried to be smart and stay on the line, but it makes me feel as though I weren't living up to my own ideas and principles. I'm going to miss the fall at home and the apples and leaves and smells and stuff. I've got a lump in my throat now just thinking about it. Love, Bud. Oh, so, I mean, if you've ever moved to a strange place to try to make a life as a young person.
You can sympathize with that for sure.
Yeah. So I think that letter was good because it really begins to paint a picture. So we're going to move really quickly to the new school here and to some of his thinking about Jews. Is very interesting. So I attended the new school for social research for only a year, but what a year it was. The school in New York itself had become a sanctuary for hundreds of extraordinary European Jews who had fled Germany and other countries before and during World War II. And they were enriching the city's intellectual life with an intensity that has probably never been equaled anywhere during a comparable period of time. I was raised largely by these Jews. I lived in a world of Jews. They were my teachers. They were my employers. They were my friends. They introduced me to a world of books and ideas that I didn't know existed. I stayed up all night with them, asking questions, arguing, probing, discovering how little I knew, learning how inarticulate I was and how abysmal my education was. I hadn't even finished high school, and many of them had advanced degrees from the finest institutes in Europe. I felt dumb and ashamed, but they gave me an appetite to learn everything. They made me hungry for information. I believed that if I had more knowledge, I'd be smarter, which I now realize isn't true. He read Kant, Rousseau, Nietzsche, Locke, Melville, Tolstoy, Faulkner, Dostoevsky, and books by dozens of other authors, many of which I never understood.
I like the humility of that. Like, I read it. I didn't get it. But
Yep.
Well, it makes me think. So he didn't even finish high school. He had access to this great education. Man, you're not getting into new school in 2021 if you didn't finish high school. Like,
no, but it was it's a different time.
Yeah, for sure.
He goes on here talking about this experience of being immersed in Jewish New York. He talks about a Yiddish word, sechel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Maybe sechel. That provides a key to explaining the most profound aspects of Jewish culture. It means to pursue knowledge and to leave the world a better place than when you entered it. Jews revere education and hard work. See, he came to the conclusion that in the end, being Jewish was a cultural phenomenon rather than a genetic one. It's a state of mind. So he really appreciated it. And it would color and influence his life and his politics. He also goes on, because he can't help himself, to talk about how there was a tradition of sort of young Jewish women setting themselves up in an apartment for a year or two before really digging into a career, and how he would sleep with all of them.
Yeah, right.
Again.
Yes.
So he's learning a lot out in New York City.
Yeah, man.
So he fools around with the idea of being a dancer. Okay. Fools around with that briefly. And it's actually his pal, Wally Cox, who they end up living together in New York City. They're roommates. His pal sends him to Stella Adler, says you should go and study acting with her. So Stella Adler is one of the major acting teachers in history. Just a very, very big deal. And her method obviously influenced Brando, and then through Brando would influence everyone. I think it's worth pausing to say he's the Elvis of acting. Or like the Elvis and the Johnny Cash of acting. There's nobody in terms of film acting that the generations following would refer to with the same reverence. Right. We're still in the theater phase. So this is Act 2 in New York City, the theater. But when we get to the film phase, there's some really incredible stuff that we'll dig into. But so here's what he says about method acting and Stella. So Stella always said no one could teach acting, but she could. She had a knack for teaching people about themselves, enabling them to use their emotions and bring out their hidden sensitivity. This is one of the things that you talk about in the method, and that he would talk about. You would take a scene and you would draw on personal experiences to bring an emotional authenticity to the scene. So you're inhabiting a character, but you're filling the character with your own experiences while inhabiting the world of the character.
And I could see that being, you watch a film from the 30s or 40s and the acting performances don't have that, I would say, for the most part.
Right. And the first film that he would go on to make after his resounding success on Broadway with Streetcar was a film called The Men. Okay. And we'll get to it because it's really hard to watch. You have Brando acting in the Brando method, cast against actors acting in the older method.
Right. So they're in their mid-Atlantic accents and sort of snappy and
precisely. We'll talk about it.
Okay, that sounds cool.
So here's what he has to say about the method. Method acting was a term popularized, bastardized, and misused by Lee Strasberg. This is another thing. This whole acting teacher milieu at the time in New York City, people still trace their lineage back to these people, and it's like karate guys arguing about which sensei could beat up which other sensei.
Right. Yeah, I've heard of Strasberg too. Yeah, no, I kind of vaguely know what you mean. Yeah.
He really didn't like Lee Strasberg.
Okay.
What Stella taught her students was how to discover the nature of their own emotional mechanics and therefore those of others. She taught me to be real and not to try to act out an emotion I didn't personally experience during a performance. Don't fake the emotion.
Yeah, you have to get to the place where you actually have the emotion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because of Stella, and Stella Adler would be a great episode. Acting changed completely during the 50s and 60s. Until the generation she inspired came along, most actors were what I have always thought of as personality actors. And he named some names. George Bernard Shaw once said, a character actor is one who cannot act and therefore makes an elaborate study of disguise and stage tricks by which acting can be grotesquely simulated. A lot of actors believe that by growing a beard, checking out a robe from the wardrobe department, and carrying a staff, they could become Moses. He learns his craft here, and he begins to do a few plays.
How is he sort of financing this? I mean, or maybe, what is he? How is he paying to go to Stella Adler?
That's a really good question. It isn't entirely clear to me. I think he may have some support from his family.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find anything in the near term here. I also want to get a clear sort of. It's a good question. I'd like to know, because isn't this often the case? Where you kind of wonder, how are you funding this? Also though, this is a different time. It's like, how did you Hemingway move to Paris for a year, rent an apartment? Oh, I sold some magazine stories.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I worked in a post office for 3 months, and then
and I saved up some money, and my grandfather left me $100, and right. Well, so we're in his early career, 44 through 51. He would do some summer stock theater on Long Island. He also established a pattern of erratic, insubordinate behavior,
Okay.
which this would last his entire life. And when we get into Act 3, the film period, we're really going to have some fun stories. Yeah. He got kicked out of a cast of the New School's production in Sayville. He found a locally produced play there. He did that. Then he did a play in 44. He made it to Broadway. He had looks. Brando had looks. Yeah. And I would say too, and this is not, I don't think this is too controversial. The theater audiences in this period in New York City were overwhelmingly Jewish. There was a rich Jewish middle class that would support the theater in New York City. And so there's a quality of like otherness to Brando. He's this kind of this hayseed from the Midwest. So he's got the looks. He's moving in the right circles, and he starts to get some parts. So he does a play called I Remember Mama. Then he would, in 1946, he was in a political drama called A Flag is Born, which was highly political, and it was all about the formation of Israel, the aspiration to Israel. Okay. So I'm going to read a quote from him about this from the book. Everyone in A Flag is Born was Jewish except me. Paul Mooney, the star, gave an astonishing performance, the best acting I have ever seen. I was on stage with him, and he gave me goosebumps. His performance was magical and affected me deeply. He likes the word magic, too. Brando was a mystic.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a mystic. His performance was magical and affected me deeply. He was the only actor who ever moved me to leave my dressing room and watch him from the wings. He never failed to chill me with one particular speech. I played a young Jewish firebrand named David, struggling to find his way to Palestine. In a graveyard, he meets the wounded and dying Tevye, a prophet-like man played by Mooney, who tries to help him but dies. David covers him with a Jewish flag, then exits, presumably to carry on the fight to make a homeland in Palestine. At the beginning of the second act, I had a speech during which a sharp light came down from above and two other lights hit me from the side. It was a fiery, accusatory speech that began with a pause. I waited a long time after the curtain went up, then quietly said, "Where were you?" I paused again and said, "Where were you, Jews?" Another long pause, and then I started to yell at the top of my lungs, "Where were you, Jews, when 6 million Jews were being burned to death in the ovens? Where were you?" Oof. It sent chills through the audience, which was almost always all Jewish. Because at the time, there was a great deal of soul searching within the Jewish community over whether they had done enough to stop the slaughter of their people. Some argued that they should have applied pressure on President Roosevelt to bomb Auschwitz, for example. So the speech touched a sensitive nerve. At some performances, Jewish girls got out of their seats and screamed and cried from the aisles in sadness. And at one, when I asked, "Where were you when 6 million Jews were being burned to death in the ovens of Auschwitz?" a woman was so overcome with anger and guilt that she rose and shouted back at me, "Where were you?" So he's becoming politicized too, and he's imbibing the politics of this social circle in New York City, and he would be a lefty, a pretty hardcore lefty type. So he becomes sort of involved in those politics. He admits that this is just a piece of propaganda. I mean, he did a propaganda play, but he's in the theater, and now, of course, we're coming to the Great Coup, which everybody's familiar. Well, most people are. If you listen to the Tennessee Williams episode, you'll be familiar with it. Streetcar.
Mm-hmm. So what year is that? Streetcar?
Let me make sure that I get it right. Let's see here.
So that was was that his first actual film that he was in?
Well, no, Streetcar was the second film, so we're still in the theater here.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, no worries. I want to make sure I get the year right for Streetcar.
Don't mean to scramble you.
No, it's all good. Right, so 1948, and he is he's 24 years old, and he's cast in probably the greatest play of its generation. Mm-hmm. So he
was in the Broadway version.
Yes. Okay. This is the thing that made him him famous. So he's using the method. He's he's cast in Streetcar. He's starring against Jessica Tandy in that, and I mean it's an absolute triumph. It opened at the Ethel Barrymore Theater in New York, December 3rd, 1947. It had tryouts in New Haven, Boston, and Philly, so they're moving it around, working on it. And he's saying, "My sister still has a telegram I sent to my father from Boston." Oh, well, here's an answer to your earlier question.
Yeah.
"Need money by tonight. Show splendid. Letter to follow, Marlon." Send Bitcoin.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, send Floki. After the opening night in New York, we went to the Russian tea room and read the reviews, starting with the New York Times. Before long, all the reviews were in and everyone relaxed. We had a hit.
Ooh, what a heady atmosphere. I'm just picturing this. You go into the Russian tea room. It's 1947. You're,
24 years old.
Right, man. And the World War II is just kind of, that's a scene.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Well, so I want to read a little more from him about this. He's saying, "We had a wonderful play under us and it was a big success. An actor can never act his way out of a bad play, no matter how well he performs. If he doesn't have real drama beneath him, he can act his best all day and it won't work. He could have the 12 disciples in the cast and Jesus Christ playing the lead and still get bad reviews if the play is poorly written.
Sure.
An actor can help a play, but he can't make it a success. In A Streetcar Named Desire, we had under us one of the best written plays ever produced, and we couldn't miss." Well, so now, now he's famous. Now money's going to start to come in, and he also started to have a breakdown as he was working on Streetcar because he was channeling the energy from his troubled relationship to his own father in order to do the play.
Well, yeah, I can see the method. The method is got to be sort of psychically dangerous, right? You spend enough time occupying the space of whatever it is. It's one thing if it's like, well, I'm doing a method of a little girl in a field, but you're doing the method of a rapist, of intense, troubled, angry person.
Right. Oof. I have an article from the Telegraph here that I want to read. So Brando was a wayward youth and dyslexic high school dropout. Arriving on a train from Nebraska, the 18-year-old initially slept on the streets of New York. I don't know how true that is, but he had his sisters there. But a more complex picture soon emerged of a raw genius with a desperation to learn and seek truth. Brando was already an acute observer of behavior, wandering the streets to study people, from bankers to longshoremen to hobos. When he joined the nurturing environment of Stella Adler's acting class at the New School, he seized the opportunity to educate himself, devouring books and developing a love of academia that would endure a lifetime. And that's true. In the final interview with Larry King, and we'll get to this at the very end, but Larry King talks about how he went to Brando's home and there was not a sign that Brando was a famous actor in the home. It was a lot of books. He said a lot of books on architecture. Brando was interested in that. And if you watch, and I do encourage you, if you're interested in Brando as a character, we do have some great media about him. Just go to YouTube and look up Marlon Brando or Marlon Brando interview. There are some really, really fun ones. He was very combative in interviews, and his favorite sort of trick was, so I don't know if it was a trick, but his favorite sort of thing was to point out how strange it was to even be doing the interview. He was one of these people like,
right.
Well, and this stems from something that he would say, in which he firmly believed, that everyone's always acting. We're all always acting. And he would say things to like Connie Chung or to Dick Cavett. The Dick Cavett interview was very fun. That was around the Native American activism. We'll come to that. Or Larry King, he would say, "No, you're acting all the time."
Right.
These poor interviewers would always come back and say, "Well, but Marlon, that's you do something different." He's like, "No, it's no different."
Oh, dang. Yeah. Well, to be a genius level actor would be to understand that very deeply, right? To understand the performative aspect of everything all the time.
Yes, indeed.
Interesting.
Well, I'm still in the Telegraph article here, but Brando learned from Adler the revolutionary method technique that urged the actor to draw upon their own memories and experiences to create a more realistic and naturalistic portrayal. His reservoirs of past emotion ran deeper than most, and he proved a precocious student. His electrifying stage performance in Streetcar would be the very reenactment of his own traumatic childhood memories.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, so Streetcar ran for 2 years. It was a sellout. And again, I'm still in the Telegraph article. This is actually going to be a good segue for us to go from Act 2 to Act 3. We're going to Hollywood. Mm-hmm. So Streetcar was a sellout sensation, but he left Broadway for Hollywood. Now, the myth is that he jumped for the money. But the tapes they're referring to here, so there were sort of some very, very long tape recordings of Brando that were only recently discovered. He claimed that the channeling of his father's violence every night had driven him to the point of a nervous breakdown.
Wow. Yeah.
So now
the price of success a little bit there, right? Like,
right.
What is it? Where do you got to go? How deep do you got to go to make this happen, to have a career like this, to have that, standing ovations at your performances? Yeah, it's heavy.
Yeah. I want to read from the biography to kind of the final thing in this New York acting theater period. Of course, there were advantages to success in a Broadway play, and not merely the $550 a week paycheck. He says it'd be about $5,000 in the 90s. Not bad per week.
Yeah.
Although I told my father when I was rehearsing for The Eagle Has Two Heads that I wanted to look after my own financial affairs, he persuaded me that I was not only too busy, but too inexperienced with money to handle it properly. So I turned my check over to him.
Oh.
Yeah, whoops. He paid my rent, gave me pocket change, and invested the money. The money that came with A Streetcar Named Desire was less important to me, however, than something else. Every night after the performance, there would be 7 or 8 girls waiting in my dressing room. I looked them over and chose one for the night. Whoa. I was a 24-year-old who was eager to follow his loins wherever it would go. It was wonderful. It was more than that. To be able to get just about any woman I wanted into bed was intoxicating. I loved parties, danced, played the congas, and I loved to be with women. Any woman, anybody's wife. Sometimes, Marlon.
Yeah.
Jeez, so you've got this kind of somewhat schizoid character here. He's very interested in arts and the intellectual, and we're going to leave the world a better place than we found it in this sort of Jewish tradition. But also, I am sleeping with your wife.
Right. I will destroy your family on a whim. Yeah.
So he's a complicated character.
Yeah, for sure.
A walking Me Too.
Yeah.
Sometimes I did insane things. When I lived on the 11th floor of an apartment building on 72nd Street, I gave a party one night where just about everyone, including me, was smashed or close to it. And I went over to a window, opened it, and shouted to my guests, "I'm sick of this world and everything in it. I can't stand you people. I'm sick of this life." I stepped out the window and disappeared. I stood on a ledge about 6 inches wide beneath the window, ducked and lay flat against the wall and clung to the windowsill with my hands. Then I held onto a cement balustrade on the side of the building with one hand and let go of the windowsill. My guests screamed. They thought I'd become a blotter on 72nd Street. I hid under the window giggling, then looked down, saw the street and gulped. Everyone was still screaming, and one girl finally ran over to the window and looked up and down 72nd Street, searching for my body before spotting me. Then she said, "Go ahead, drop, see if I care." I crawled back up laughing. Everybody was red in the face. Their veins were popping out of their foreheads, and everyone shook their fists at me. It was nuts. I was fearless after 2 or 3 drinks. So, he's got too much money, and okay. So, and then he talks a little more about discovering women who have daddies, and all the rest of it.
Wow.
Now we got a star on our hands.
Yeah, right. And all the problems that come with it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Well, we're gonna move into Act 3 of Marlon Brando, and he is lured out to Hollywood. He does do a film called The Men. Have you ever heard of The Men?
I've never heard of The Men. No.
Yeah, I watched this last night. I think it's worth talking a little bit about. 1950, American drama. Fred Zinnemann directed this, and it didn't do well commercially, but critics praised it. The film opens with a dedication. This is the dedication, and this is good because it puts us in time.
Yeah.
Again, here's the dedication. It's a very serious film, right? Mm-hmm. In all wars since the beginning of history, there have been men who fought twice. The first time they battled with club, sword, or machine gun. The second time they had none of these weapons. Yet this by far, what is the greatest battle? It was fought with abiding face and rock courage, and in the end, victory was achieved. This is the story of such a group of men. To them, this film is dedicated. So it's a film about
the men.
The men.
Okay.
During World War II, a lieutenant is shot in the spine by a sniper. And it's all set in a hospital, and it's about... and it actually includes some of the men at the Birmingham Veterans Administration Hospital.
Oh, okay.
The film was made there, and this is a good point. Brando checked himself in to get the role down, so he didn't just imagine it. He actually checked himself into this hospital in order to research the subject matter.
You want to get the rhythms and the terms and the stir craziness and the I get it.
And if you're interested in Brando, this isn't the worst film ever made. It's got a little bit of
high praise.
Yeah, well, I mean, Brando made a lot of stinkers. I've been subjected to some.
Well, dude, the 50s. I know we all love to praise old Hollywood films, but what we really mean is we're praising like the 5 to 10% of them that hold up at all. Like there was a lot of junk being cranked out back then.
That, and Brando is a great example. There's going to be a period after one of the films he makes bombs horribly, where I'll read a list of the films that he made for the following 10 years, and you probably won't know the name of a single one of them.
Wow. Okay.
Because it's just not on the radar.
Yeah.
The film was banned in the UK. There's a long scene at the beginning where the doctor is talking to women, talking to the wives, the fiancés, and the subject of children comes up. And he admits that because you're dealing with paraplegics, it's really unlikely.
Right.
And that's at the heart of this film. The fiance still wants to marry him, still loves him, but the parents are like, what are you doing? Yeah. So there's a lot of pathos in this film, but as an artifact, it's worth watching because when the actors of the old school are acting together, you kind of go, oh, we're in a movie from the 1950s. Okay, right. Cool. And then as soon as Brando comes on the screen, something entirely different is happening. Shockingly different.
Right.
It's worth the $3.99 download online to stream it just to see. And it's got there's a bit of a Hemingway vibe.
Sounds like
it, right?
Yeah.
The name escapes me. The Sun Also Rises, right? It has that kind of a vibe and a mood.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's out in Hollywood now, and this is where we're gonna start to get into his filmography. I want to make sure I get it right. He would do Streetcar next, and Streetcar would come out in 1951. And when you compare a movie like The Men to Streetcar, it's almost like, is this the same medium? What am I watching? One is like a made-for-TV movie. The other is one of the greatest films ever made. Yeah. And that's Elia Kazan, who I believe directed the play. I want to make sure I get that right. Kazan. You've seen Streetcar, right?
I have, yeah. I mean, it's been years, but yes, and I was definitely struck by it for sure. And I mean, that was also, it's interesting. So that's Brando's sort of big break, and that's also really Tennessee Williams' big break as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it was Kazan. Yeah. I just needed to make sure. I didn't want to. I should know that, but I just wanted to make sure. But we have the running theme in Brando's life is the sex and the sexuality. So let's talk about Brando. So this is an article. So they're citing a book I have. It's a biography called The Contender: The Story of Marlon Brando, William J. Mann, and so everybody knows he was a playboy, but that book goes a little deeper. And Mann claims that Brando began his days with a particular thought, which pretty much summed up his attitude in life. And I'm going to say a polite version of this, but he would say to himself, when I wake in the morning, the first thing I think about is, who am I going to screw today?
Jeez.
I mean, right? Like, whoa.
That's like almost like a predator mindset. Not even like a sexual, but that's like what a lion thinks when it wakes up. What am I going to eat today?
It would be diagnosable today, I'm sure. But then he was the top actor in Hollywood. He would become one of the top actors in Hollywood very quickly.
Right.
The list, it says here, would surprise you. Rita Moreno, Marilyn Monroe, Richard Pryor, Quincy Jones. He was indiscriminate and I think genuinely a bisexual, not LARPing.
Sounds like it,
not in a monogamous relationship for a period of time.
Right, and not like man, it was on a drug bender and it got weird and like, but you know, like
yeah.
Interesting.
Right. So he just drew people to him. He had slept with several men on the Shattuck campus here in Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
And he wasn't guilt-ridden at all. He was at ease.
Yeah. Interesting.
So that's a funny thing to think about. Brando waking up in the morning and kind of going, I'm gonna who's it gonna be today?
Right.
I want to get the business about Maryland. Let me make sure I have it here. Because that's awfully fun. He has a great quote about it. Let's see. Yeah, so his affair his affair with Monroe began after they bumped into each other, literally at a party in New York after he finished filming Streetcar. Monroe, and I remember this. Monroe was taking classes with Lee Strasberg. At the Actors Studio, where Brando often headed to meet girls.
Yeah.
Are you getting a picture?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is from, So while the other partygoers drank and laughed, Monroe quietly played the piano by herself in a corner. When she tapped Brando on the shoulder, he turned sharply and accidentally caught her in the face with his elbow. When he apologized profusely, saying
that's like a pickup artist thing now, probably, right? That's called pulling a Brando.
Oh no, man! Oh, I hate that PUA stuff drives me nuts. It's the worst.
Yeah,
quite literally, the best advice you could give to a young man is to read some of that stuff and forget it and don't do it. Don't just forget you ever read it and don't be like those guys.
Yes.
You're going to be fine. Just be honest, or as honest as you can be.
Yeah.
Monroe quietly played the piano by herself in a corner. Right. Okay. Right. When he apologized profusely, she gave him a deadpan retort. There are no accidents. Stunned for a second, Brando then dissolved into laughter and told her she couldn't play the piano worth a damn. He's negging. Yeah, I think it came naturally to him, though. Probably. I don't think he didn't have to work at this at all.
Right.
Yeah. So they struck up a friendship. Then one night he just called her and said, "I want to come over." And she invited him over.
He'd woken up that morning and the answer was clear to the question.
Yes, right. He probably had a pinup, threw a dart. And the quote, I quite like this from him, is, "She invited me over," he wrote, "and it wasn't long before every soldier's dream came true." What do you... Yeah.
He's not wrong, I guess. Yeah.
So they did have a relationship. Obviously, Marilyn is someone that we'll get to. They did have an ongoing sexual relationship, but they did have an emotional bond. He thought that she was sensitive and misunderstood and way more perceptive than people assumed.
Yeah, that's what I've heard in the sort of the ongoing revision of the Marilyn Monroe identity, was that she was a lot smarter than anybody ever gave her credit for at the time.
Yeah. He said she had been beaten down and had demons, but also had a strong emotional intelligence, a keen intuition for the feelings of others, the most refined type of intelligence. And they would speak on the phone for hours at a time until she died.
Yeah.
And she confided in him how she felt exploited and mistreated.
Yeah. Jeez.
And she called him 2 or 3 days before she died.
Wow.
And pretty tragic. He lived a life. He was definitely there. So that's just a little interlude for Marilyn. But now we're going to take a pit stop. That to me is just so surprising.
Yeah.
James Dean.
Yeah. What?
Now he's had the soldier's dream with Marilyn.
Yeah.
And I'm reading an article here. It's a little listicle about 5 quick facts. It's from heavy.com, but it's James Dean and Marlon Brando reportedly had a secret sadomasochistic relationship.
Whoa.
Yeah. And they're citing a book. I want to make sure I have the book. Let me see. Right. It's called James Dean, Tomorrow Never Comes. And we got to do James Dean at some point.
We'll have to do James Dean. Yeah.
Yeah. But the 2 actors would partake in master and servant style sex sessions.
Wait. But who? It's got to be Brando master.
Brando
Dean.
was the master, and
okay.
Dean was the puppy dog. Wow. Dean reportedly asked Brando to burn him with cigarettes. Yeah.
Whoa, that is
dark. Yeah. When Dean would meet up with Brando, he would reportedly request to be burned by cigarettes. Now, this is the Daily Mail. This is, so we'll take some of this with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But Brando's sexuality is pretty far out.
Right.
Apparently, Brando was the dominant one, and he would make Dean watch him with other people.
Whoa.
And
dude, I didn't know what to expect this episode. I did not expect to learn that James Dean was a cuck. I did not see that. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. I think the entire world was a cuck to Marlon.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
He was just such a figure. They had Dean and Brando had a turbulent relationship. They had a big public fight over other male romantic interests in Santa Monica. And Brando elaborated on this. Marlon had a bit of a fling with Cary Grant, spending a weekend with him in San Francisco.
Oh, really?
Cary was also pursuing the actor Stuart Granger, who became another of Marlon's conquests. Wow. And I think calling them conquests is fair here. This isn't some frat boy going out and dating somebody for 3 months.
Well, the whole thing about I'll sleep with your wife. That's a power move as much as it is a sex move.
Yeah. Well, this is really funny too, because one of the other early films, I watched a bit of it. You can find a bit on YouTube. I didn't watch the whole thing, but this is one thing about Brando now too, in the film period, whatever that method was, whatever talent that Brando naturally had, he found the right fit in the method, because he did Shakespeare, he did modern plays. He would eventually do Guys and Dolls, and he would sing and dance in it. He's not a great singer. He's not a great dancer, but enough to play opposite of Sinatra and hold his own and get good reviews and be very entertaining. That's a very entertaining film. Guys and Dolls is really kind of fun. You know that one? Yeah,
well, I saw it years ago, and I've seen it live twice, actually, for a variety of reasons. Yeah. And I guess I didn't realize Brando was in it.
He was in the film version of it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Marlon admired John Gielgud, who's I think a famous English director, I think. But they didn't have a relationship. Rather, Brando performed favors for him, sexual favors for Gielgud, and told friends, I owed it to him because he really helped me with the lines in Julius Caesar.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So you've got this
sleeping his way to the top too, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. I think Brando's doing the things that he has to do. He's already on the top. Pretty soon he's on top. I don't think he didn't win an Oscar for Streetcar, but that's coming. They're saying here that he liked to play a cat and mouse game with Dean. you know, he, an epic womanizer. He had an addiction. Dean would loiter outside Brando's apartment like a puppy dog, is what people would say.
Wow.
So,
and was this, to what degree did people know about this? I mean, some people must have known, right?
There's a quote from Brando where I don't think let me see if I can find the exact quote, but if not, I can paraphrase, where he says, oh yeah, here it is. This is in the Wikipedia. Brando was known for his tumultuous personal life and his large number of partners and children. And we're going to start to get to the wives. He was the father to at least 11 children. Wow. 3 of whom were adopted.
Yeah.
And this is much later. But in 1976, he told a French journalist, homosexuality is so much in fashion, it no longer makes news. Like a large number of men, I too have had homosexual experiences, and I'm not ashamed. I've never paid much attention to what people think about me. But if there is someone who is convinced that Jack Nicholson and I are lovers, may they continue to do so. I find it amusing. This dude just loves sex.
Yeah, that's his thing.
Yeah, it was right. There's not a lot of substance abuse as far as I can tell here.
Okay,
but,
I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
Yeah, but in lieu of substance abuse, we have sort of wild sex.
Yeah.
Well,
hey.
Yeah,
pick your poison, I guess.
Well, you gotta have something. Yeah. What is it? No more drugs for me, Kanye. I mean, we got both the other things here. So yeah, I want to get into. We're gonna kind of, in the interest of time, we're gonna start to blast through the filmography here. So we have The Men. We have Streetcar, which is one of the greatest films ever made. He made a film, Viva Zapata, in 1952. Which is a little
Zapata.
Yeah, he plays Zapata, and Elia Kazan directed that as well. It was nominated. He was nominated for Best Actor. It looks like maybe it won a BAFTA award for Best Foreign Actor, and it won at Cannes. So I think it was pretty well received. It's a little funny because he definitely is kind of in a little bit of it's not a blackface situation, but it's a little bit of a brown face situation.
Well, it's funny. We there's a lot of emphasis now on getting a person of whatever ethnicity to play that, and sometimes it's a little too much. But you do go back to that era, and it's like, wait, Charlton Heston is playing like an Indian war chief? Like, what is going on?
Yeah. Brando, I think, would make good on this sort of id pol anxiety later, and we'll come to that. So, yeah, he makes that film, and then let's go. Then he makes Julius Caesar, which he's very good. Sure. He's playing Mark Antony, and I watched a clip of it, and he's giving the famous I think it's friends Romans countrymen. It's that
that's an adaptation of the Shakespeare play, right?
Yes.
Or is it its own?
Yes.
Okay. I've never seen that.
Yeah, and so it's a case of like, well, can this actor who's famous for his modernity, for this new modern method of acting, what can he bring to that? Yeah,
can he pull a Laurence Olivier?
Right. Yeah. And he does.
Right. Okay.
So it's a faithful adaptation of Shakespeare's play, no significant cuts. The only notable exception is the messenger's text recounting the Battle of Philippi, where they actually show the battle.
Okay.
Yeah. I kind of want to see. Yeah, it was really favorable reviews.
Okay.
And so this would be one to watch, I think.
As an actor, I mean, getting critical accolades for a Shakespeare adaptation is pretty high up there, I would think, in terms of like artistic merit of your craft.
On your list of and of course you're given Gielgud Hummers in return.
Pretty good at those too. Probably.
Yeah, pretty good at a lot of things. I'm a song and dance man. I do Shakespeare. Right. Here's John Gielgud. I'll go to his dressing room. I'll be right back. Come to my dressing room. Yeah.
Right.
So Marlon, really, truly a Renaissance man. Yeah. So you have Marlon Brando as Mark Antony, James Mason as Brutus. Just one of these great classic adaptations.
I'm going to watch that, actually. Yeah, that sounds great.
Gielgud played Cassius, and he was an actor and director. He's quite a famous figure. All right. Now, at this point in his personal life, we're in 1953, and Brando's mother passes away. And I want to get a little bit about that.
1953, you said?
1953, his mother passes away. I just want to make sure I get this. I have a bit about his mother, or actually what happened with his father after his mother passed away. But I want to see if I can find a bit about her. So
Brando's not even 30 yet at this point. 1953.
Let me do the math. What year did we say he was born?
24.
Yeah, 24. He's not even 30.
Right.
And he's doing, he's already doing Shakespeare and, just absolutely incredible. Let me make sure I get this because I want to have it. Let's see. Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I have this, I have something about what happened with his father after his mother died. So he's talking about a few years later.
Yeah.
So a few years after my mother died in 1953, my father remarried, and at 70, he had an affair with one of my secretaries. He changed little as he grew older, always handsome, always a miser, always a charmer, always a philanderer. He never lost the shyness that people, especially women, liked about him. It was something he came by naturally. Though he was very masculine, he also had a gentleness, humility, and quietness that people liked, along with a very genuine sense of humor. He was unsuited to do anything in the movie business, but I had given him a salary, a desk, an office, a secretary, and an opportunity to look busy and feel useful. So Marlon hated his father, but he also kept him close, which I think I respect.
Yeah.
Then one day, without telling me about it, he fired one of my friends. When I heard about it, I went to his office and told him that my friend was not going to be fired. And from somewhere inside me, a tidal wave rose, crested, flooded, and I reduced him to a heap of shambling, stuttering, fast blinking confusion. I said he should consider himself fortunate to have a job, since anybody else with his qualifications would be in a poorhouse. I went over the history of our family and told him that he had ruined my mother's life and had used every opportunity to belittle me and make me feel inadequate. I told, let me see here. I took him apart with pliers, bit by bit, hunk by hunk, and distributed his psyche all over the floor. I was cold, correct, and logical. No screaming or yelling, just stone frozen cold. And when he tried to make excuses, I slammed down an iron gate and reminded him what a shambles he had made of our lives. I told him that he was directly responsible for making my sisters alcoholics, and that he was cold, unloving, selfish, infantile, terminally despicable, and self-absorbed. I made him feel useless, helpless, hopeless, and weak. I assaulted him for almost 3 hours when he tried to end the conversation, like a play.
Right, yeah.
And when he tried to end the conversation, I said, sit down if you expect to be paid any money from this day forward. Whoa. You will listen to what your employer is telling you. I am your employer, and you are something of an employee. At least you bear that name, and you will do what I tell you. In 3 hours, I did what in 33 years I had never been able to do. Yet the whole time I was scared.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's intense. That is intense.
Oh,
well, and you can see it. I mean, you can, the sort of building up to that point makes sense, right? I mean, Brando is he's at this godlike moment.
Yeah.
Right. Up to that, powerful and attractive and making money and critical success and the top of his art form. And, this mewling guy who had abused him is, oh yeah, that's intense. That I could see somebody making that into an incredible little one-act play,
just unreal.
Yeah.
And there's not a whole lot about his mother's death. The going on about his father here. A few days later, I got a call from a psychiatrist who said that my father was seeing him and then he needed my cooperation because his patient was in a serious depression and on the edge of a precipice. Well, doctor, I said, I appreciate your calling. When my father has gone over the edge of that depression and smashed himself on the rocks below, when he's hit bottom, please call me and I'll see if I can arrange something.
Wow.
After that, I always kept my father on a tight leash so that he could never come near me and never get too far away. I had him under control and never let him go.
Whoa. Dang.
Dark.
Right.
Dark.
Well, man, and there's something to, I mean, there's something about the BDSM thing that he had with James Dean in there too, right? Like it's all of a piece. There's something about, you know, being weak and then becoming powerful. Like that's intense. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to pause briefly to talk about his feelings about the theater.
Okay, yeah.
And why he didn't return to the theater. In the interviews, he talks about this as well, and they're worth. Again, these video interviews with him are pretty interesting. Yeah. Well, so here's what he said. He's talking about making Streetcar. After he made Streetcar, he made the decision he was not going to go back to the theater.
Okay.
Making the movie reinforced my decision not to take on another Broadway play. I've heard it said that I sold out to Hollywood. In a way, it's true, but I knew exactly what I was doing. I've never had any respect for Hollywood. It stands for avarice, phoniness, greed, crassness, and bad taste. But when you act in a movie, you only have to work 3 months a year. Then you can do as you please for the rest.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. That's a good enough reason.
I mean, that's pretty much what it is. I mean, and for him too, I think, again, Streetcar kind of broke his brain.
Yeah.
Doing the play, and then he's right in a funny way. I love the theater, of course, and things have changed from that time. But if you had a hit play, you would do it for. There were actors who, famously, the woman who delivers the line "a handbag" in Ernest, I think did the play for 30 years.
That's insane. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see. Yes, you bring joy to a great many people. You make a fortune.
Right.
But my goodness,
I mean, there's a monotony to, there's got to be a monotony to that.
Absolutely.
There has to be, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
I can understand in certain parts you could maybe find new intricacies to it, right? And it could be, the part itself could be that captivating where it's like, you could work on it and develop it for years, but eventually it's just like, the lines are the same every night.
I would go nuts if I had to do the same
too
play
much.
for a year. Yeah. I would absolutely go crazy. Yeah. By the time I stage one of my plays, it's almost like I'm over it.
Which is for sure.
Sort of, people maybe don't understand that. And obviously I want to stage many of my plays, and please produce my plays.
Yeah. Well, writing's the same, man. Like once I finish it, I don't want to reread any of it. It's done.
I kind of feel for musicians too. It's like Bob Dylan going around and playing like a Rolling Stone. It's you just got to go, gosh, can I just, Well, so getting back to the filmography, he's just done Julius Caesar. Now he does The Wild One. Do you know The Wild One, Brad?
I can't say I've seen it. I'm familiar with it though. I know of it.
Yeah. It's a very cool movie. The Wild One is a movie that is a mood. And it has enough of an artistic bent. The director, Laszlo Benedek, is enough like Dutch angles and interesting shots to sort of keep your attention. You can kind of see how it would have influenced Tarantino, how it might have influenced David Lynch, or just these interesting things. And it's all just about the Black Rebels motorcycle gang. Right. And Brando plays Johnny Strabler, and they go into, or Strabler. Yeah. They go into Carbonville, California during a motorcycle race, and they cause trouble.
Right.
And one of the guys steals the second place trophy. And then the policemen order them to leave. Then they head to Wrightsville, and there's only one elderly lawman. So it's just this like, and they're in the cafe and they're rival biker gangs and
there used to be a little bit of like a fear of biker gangs, I feel like. Back
big time.
then, right?
No, right.
And when the Hells Angels came out and all that.
Oh, yeah. And we're going to get into that too. Hunter S. Thompson, when we do Hunter.
Yeah.
Right. Hells Angels, that book made Hunter Thompson. And this was definitely lurking in the background, right? And here's the thing. This movie looks so darn cool. It looks just cool, right? Like they're all like if you showed up dressed like Brando dresses in this movie, you'd fit right in. Like it's a style and it holds up. Right. And he's got these incredible leather jackets and he's just exuding sexuality like he does. There's a great line from this film. Something like, what are you rebelling against, Johnny? And he says, "What do you got?"
Right. It's pretty based.
Yeah. There's apparently a story saying that the Beatles took their name from the rival motorcycle club.
Oh, really?
Referred to as Beatles. So who knows?
Okay.
Yeah. So pretty cool. Yeah, right, exactly. In Twin Peaks, Michael Cera plays Wally Brando, who dresses like Johnny Strabler and does a Brando impression. So, yeah, definitely influenced Lynch. I didn't just pull that out of the air.
Yeah.
So cool. So we got the Wild One under our belts, and now we're coming up to one of the big ones, one of the ones that everybody knows. On the Waterfront. When's the last time you watched On the Waterfront, Brad?
It's been years, but it's captivating. It's we were talking about 5 to 10% or less of movies from the 50s or whatever really hold up, and that is definitely one of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is a film that he made with Kazan, and just such a good movie. I saw a screening of this at the United Palace in New York City, which is this great old cinema, and they screen movies. And one of the young actors, the young actor who played the pigeon keeper with him, helped him keep his pigeons, was there as an old man talking about what it was like to work with Brando. So
cool.
Everybody loves that. I neglected to mention, too, a little anecdote from the theater days. Back when you and I were at UT, the Harry Ransom Center has quite a lot of Tennessee Williams errata, miscellany. And one of the objects that was under glass there was a little black book, which had been poached by the stage manager from Brando. Brando had lost it or left it in his dressing room, or maybe the stage manager grabbed it one night. Because apparently the stage manager, I think, maybe had a little bit of a grudge against Marlon. Sure. And the little black book was just phone numbers.
Right.
For partners.
He probably slept with that stage manager's wife,
or her husband.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, and look, if you don't know On the Waterfront, it's a must watch. It's
great. This is also another famous, like, sort of iconic. I could have been a contender.
I could have been somebody. I could have been. You should have taken care of me.
Yeah.
You were my brother. You should have looked after me instead of going after the short money or whatever it was. It's just such a great that scene. I got choked up a little bit the last time I watched that.
It's also a great, like, and then a lot of movies deal with class, but it's a great film for just dealing with American class situation.
Yeah, and it's a mob movie.
Yeah.
So. Which, of course, we're going to come back to big time. So, it won Best Picture, Best Actor for Brando. Now we're on top of the world. I've won Best Actor. I have the Oscar. I'm in my early 30s, and nothing can stop me now. So, let's keep on moving on, because we got to get to sort of the midpoint here of late, get toward late Brando. He did. So the year after that, he did Guys and Dolls with Sinatra.
The year after On the Waterfront, he did Guys and Dolls.
He does a song and dance thing, and
That's
he
really
dances, and he does his own. He sings. So we've got a guy who has defined a new method of acting for film by way of Stella Adler, by way of her tutelage. And by the time, I think what's happened is by the time On the Waterfront is made, everyone's picking up on what's going on in terms of that acting style. And so it's much less uneven as compared to something like The Men, where everyone's bringing a similar kind of a vibe. I mean, not quite. I mean, nobody's quite Brando. That's the point, right? But there's that great scene in Waterfront where someone pointed this out to me at one point, where he's walking with the love interest, and they're walking through a little park in Manhattan, and she drops her glove. And there's that moment where he grabs the glove and puts it on. And that's the take that makes it into the movie. And it's just this little moment. And any other actor of the old school would never would have happened. No way.
Yeah.
Cut.
Right. What are you doing? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And Kazan knows, just let it roll. Let's see what is Marlon going to do. Well, so we're getting to his first marriage. Now, he would have 3 wives. And I want to talk about the first one. His first wife was asking him to allow ads. Let's see here. I'm just grabbing. So her name was Anna Kashfi, and they had a bit of a violent relationship. Apparently, and there's a book called Brando's Bride. She was a star herself.
She's like a Russian. What was she?
Let me find out what her background is. I want to get it right because it's important. Now, I think his relationship. She was a British Indian film actress. She had a brief Hollywood career.
Okay.
So this marriage did not last long. I think it lasted all of 11 months. And the story is that, they divorced a year and a half later. But they would have a son who's going to come into play later, named Christian Devi Brando. And Christian will figure heavily toward the end of this episode. The claim is that Brando would bring his lovers home. Like, Brando was not playing by the rules.
Right. While they were married, he would just bring somebody home.
Yeah. So I can't even imagine being married to him. The quote here from the article I'm reading is, I think they married because she was pregnant. At that point, it was still very scandalous for a woman to have a child without being married. And it would have been scandalous for him, too, not being married to the mother of his child. He told friends that he didn't think the marriage would last, but he really wanted a baby, so he would give it a go. Not a good way to go about things.
No.
I just do not think it's just not a great way to go about things. There's a custody battle. It lasted nearly 15 years. Jeez. Court appearances. At one of them, she slapped Brando across the face.
Wow.
And they would accuse each other of domestic violence. And so she wanted to save the marriage. She's raising a baby. She just couldn't cope with all the other women. And I mean, and she's beautiful. I mean, looking at pictures here, and little Christian too, just a beautiful boy. But Brando just was not cut out for the I guess that picket fence kind of a situation.
Yeah.
Well, so getting back into the cinema, have you ever seen the film One-Eyed Jacks?
I have not seen One-Eyed Jacks. No.
One-Eyed Jacks is just a straight ahead, good Western.
Okay.
He actually took over from Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah.
And he directed it. So Brando directed it himself. And it's a Technicolor Western film, 1961.
Yeah.
Only film he directed. It was going to be directed by Kubrick. Sam Peckinpah wrote the screenplay.
Okay.
But there were studio disputes, and it's a solid kind of it's an okay Western. It's not the greatest film you're ever going to watch, but it's not. Again, it's another, you just put it on. It's kind of a mood.
Okay. Yeah.
He would make another Western later with Jack Nicholson. That's a dog.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we'll get to it. But I mean, and again, here you have that David Lynch reference. One-Eyed Jacks is the name of a brothel in the TV series Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And it's even mentioned. So, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So One-Eye Jacks, and then here's a really pivotal film. And it's also where there is a period of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 films after this next one. With 10 films after this next one, with one exception, didn't even get a single nomination for anything.
Wow.
So he just went on a tear of stinkers after this, after total critical acclaim.
Yeah.
And the film is called Mutiny on the Bounty. Have you seen Mutiny on the Bounty?
I haven't seen it. I feel like I may have had to read the book in school. Like
it's based on a book, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it's a historical event. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
It's based on an historical event. It is a film that when you it's 62, Technicolor, epic historical drama, MGM, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to be this big epic based on this real life mutiny, a prestige movie. But it ended up being a box office bomb and lost more than $6 million.
Whoa.
And a big part of that was Brando.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Apparently, filming was difficult, in part because the script was being rewritten and Brando was reportedly ad-libbing much of his part. So now we're going to get into this phase of, well, I'm Marlon Brando. Right? And yes, this is an historical epic, but I've done Shakespeare. Right. And I studied with Stella Adler. Do you know who you're talking to? I have an Oscar. Right. I mean, they made a working replica of the ship for $750,000. They sailed it to Tahiti.
Wow.
Right. And this is where Brando would have his Tahiti connection. Yeah. His second wife, I believe, was Tahiti, or maybe third, was Tahitian. We'll get to it. No, I think it would probably be around here. Right. And they would have a child together who we'll get to, Cheyenne Brando. We'll get to her near the end. So they had all kinds of delays. 150 cast and crew arrived in Tahiti. So you have to imagine. And this, I will say for this film, this is another one. It's worth watching. It's fun. I mean, they had 200 hotel rooms. So just imagine the scope of what they're trying to make here.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And now, now Brando is ad-libbing. Right. And now, but Brando loved it. And he said this: reality surpassed even my fantasies about Tahiti. And I had some of the best times of my life making Mutiny on the Bounty. Every day, as soon as the director said cut for the last time. See, and this is probably important too. He didn't have his eye on the prize here. Brando said, I ripped off my British naval officer's uniform and dove off the ship into the bay to swim with the Tahitian extras working on the movie. Often we only did 2 or 3 shots a day, which left me hours to enjoy their company, and I grew to love them for their love of life. So Brando has this fantasy a little bit of going native here, to the point where he would marry a Tahitian. And it was... And it was panned. So to the point where the Saturday Evening Post ran an article. Apparently, a Tahitian died during making the film too. Like died during like a canoe rowing scene.
Oh boy!
So it was a bit of a cursed production.
Yeah.
The Saturday Evening Post ran an article about Brando, which Brando felt disparaged him. What they really rejected, he sued them for $5 million.
For a bad review?
Yeah. Well, not a review, okay. But they were disparaging his behavior on this.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and this is worth noting that they sort of like really attacked Brando. There was an immense backlash. Again, his notorious behavior during production. Got bad press for the behavior. They didn't like his performance either. It's a little, I don't have it right in front of me, but one of the reviews talks about how, right here. Let's see. One reason for this is that they've received no help from Marlon Brando, who plays Fletcher Christian as a sort of seagoing Hamlet. Since what Fletcher Christian has to say is so much less interesting than what Hamlet has to say, Mr. Brando's tortured scowlings seem thoroughly out of place. Indeed, we tend to sympathize with the wicked Captain Bligh, well played by Trevor Howard. That's a bad review when they say we like the villain.
Right.
No wonder he behaved badly with that highborn young fop provoking him at every turn.
Oh, highborn young fop. That's a classy insult.
I mean, the UK press criticized him for an outrageously phony upper-class English accent. It just didn't. I mean, it did not get good reviews, and it had a bad performance at the box office, and this destroyed his film acting career and star power.
Wow. It's interesting that one movie can do. I don't feel like now one movie can do that to you.
I just don't know. It was the 5th highest grossing film of the year.
Yeah.
It made $13.5 million, but it needed to make $30 million to recoup its budget, and it flopped. And we're talking about millions of dollars here in the 60s.
$30 million then. In the 60s, it's roughly 8 times. You got to multiply by roughly 8 to get to modern day dollars. So you're talking $250 million film. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're not going to get your money back from the China market at that point.
Right.
You're not going to get your money back from Netflix and
rentals,
distribution and rentals. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's really, really important because he would fall in love with Tahiti, and a few years later he would buy a lease on the, I'm going to try to pronounce this, Tetiarau Atoll.
Okay.
He then married Tarita Teriapai, and I apologize if I get that wrong, in 1962, and they would have 2 children, Tahatu Brando and Cheyenne Brando.
Mm-hmm.
They would be married for 6 years, and we'll talk about, I made it that long, and we'll talk about Cheyenne. It's clear to me he had a bit of a, I don't want to say problematic God, but he had a bit of a relationship with Tahiti where it's pretty clear that he appreciated what he perceived to be not the lack of guile, but the cultural differences between the viper's nests that he had to maneuver in and the relative peace and social calm, I think, and the difference between Tahiti and, let's say, an agent's office in New York City. That makes sense. I could see, and I don't know anything about Tahiti, and I know even less about Tahiti in the 60s, but I could also imagine, like, nobody really knows who he is there. He doesn't have a public persona as much. I mean, they would know he's like a rich, successful guy, but. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And he talks about that in one of the interviews, where he says they don't care. Right. Who I am. Yeah. And if I bring some sort of like ego, it's just not going to play. He says they'll tease you mercilessly. Good. If you have heirs or whatnot. Good. Which I think is sort of wonderful. Mm-hmm. Well, so we already talked about how Brando put his father on a leash. It was around this time that his father would finally pass away. And so I want to sort of talk about, I think the tragedy of Marlon Brando is that all of those things that he talked about with his own father, he would not overcome them in his own life, in his own family, with his own children. Wow. I don't think he did. People say he was very sweet. He loved children. Mm-hmm. He loved being around children, but he had many of them, and he was simply not there for some of them. Right. And so I'm not casting judgment. But nobody's there for 11 kids. Well, you know what I mean? Like, this logistically. Right. Sure. I mean, and we're talking about different households. Right. Yeah. And, it's a case of, one wonders if he if he was sort of compensating by not being there as a father in a way for his own kind of horror at his own father's.
Right. There's all I can do is damage kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. That's that's speculation, but I think that might be, fair to say.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, and he's still having affairs and all the rest. And he had a long-term relationship with his housekeeper, had 3 children, adopted some other
They
children.
call that a Schwarzenegger, by the way. That's what that's called.
Yeah. Yeah. There were rumors about him and Wally Cox. Brando told a journalist, if Wally had been a woman, I would have married him and we would have lived happily ever after.
Aww.
But Cox, that's a bromance. That's pretty epic. Yeah. 2 of Cox's wives dismissed the suggestion that the love was more than platonic. So Brando's father dies. In the book, he talks about how important it was for him to finally sort of forgive his father in his heart. But we're heading into a really bad period here. And I want to read a little bit about it because the comeback is pretty amazing. Saying here, distracted by his personal life and becoming disillusioned with his career, Brando began to view acting as a means to a financial end. And he would say this in the interviews, they would ask, well, why are you acting? He's like, it was the most expedient way to make money. It's like, just it's a way to make money. Right. Like, okay.
Obviously.
Critics protested when he started accepting roles in films many perceived as being beneath his talent, or criticized him for having failed to live up to better roles. So now I'm just going to read. He signed a 5-picture deal with Universal that would haunt him for the rest of the decade. Oh my goodness. The Ugly American, Bedtime Story, The Appaloosa, The Countess from Hong Kong, The Night of the Following Day, critical and commercial flops. Countess was a disappointment. He wanted to work with Charlie Chaplin, but he was horrified by Chaplin's didactic style of direction and authoritarian approach. It's probably just 2 mega alphas coming together, just completely unable to vibe. Yeah. He acknowledged it too. Some of the films I made during the 60s were successful. Some weren't. Some I made only from money. Candy I did because a friend asked me to, and I didn't want to turn him down. In some ways, I think of my middle age as the screw you years. Though that's not the word he used.
Right. Agreed. I get that.
Yeah. Pretty funny. So just a dark, moody, unhappy period. Only to be broken by a little movie called The Godfather.
No, wait, what's it called?
Yeah, it's called The Godfather. When is the last time you saw The Godfather?
It wasn't that long ago. It was a couple of years ago, probably 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah,
that for me is a perennial film. I'll watch that and the second one pretty much every year.
Yeah.
I think it kind of speaks for itself. If you haven't seen The Godfather, go and watch The Godfather. It's an incredible performance. There's a good interview with Coppola where he talks about how he rehearsed with Brando. He would not do lines with Brando. He says that Brando would just show up and kind of, he'd hand him an apple and Brando would kind of be Corleone, be, Vito or whatnot, and eat the apple, and they would work that way to develop the character. Yeah. That's how they did it. Yeah. Paramount didn't want Brando. And the insistence was that
understandably so.
Yeah,
based on the
absolutely, he's not a draw. The quote is that 3 things. They said he's got to do the film for free. He's got to do a screen test, which Brando. I mean, you're not going to ask Brando to do a screen test. No. And they even insisted that Brando put up $1 million bond on the movie. so that he wouldn't disrupt the production and all. It's a big production. When you think about the guy, it's a big production. Just the wedding alone, that sequence, you're talking about millions of dollars ending up on celluloid. Yeah. But they literally thought that having him would be worse than having an unknown in that part.
Wow. But so it was Coppola who was like fighting for it?
Coppola was fighting for him. Okay. Yeah.
What year has got?
It was released in 1972.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's earlier than I thought. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, that's often the case with films that are iconic and define an era, because everything following it references it. So so there's also a really funny story from the set that Robert Duvall tells. You can find this on YouTube. But very famously, to have fun on set, they would all moon each other, and there was they had a wrestling belt for who could moon the best, right? So
what defines the best moon?
Yeah, I don't know.
Is it timing?
I don't know. The lead actors like to play pranks. It's probably timing. Yeah. Brando, Duvall, and James Caan like to pull down their pants and moon each other on set. Brando once mooned almost 500 extras. During the wedding scene, we were all mooning each other, Duvall said. Some woman turned to me and said, "Mr. Duvall, you're fine." But the story that he tells is, one of the women was like, "Did you see the balls on Brando?" So that could explain a lot about Marlon's libido. Right, but such a great movie, such an iconic performance. He's not even really in that much of the movie.
No, it's very brief. Yeah. But some of the most memorable parts of it. Right?
Oh yeah, I mean he completely dominates that.
The look, that voice,
film
everything,
and everything. Yeah. Well, so this would naturally put him back on the map completely, and this is where he refused to accept the Academy Award for Best Actor.
Ooh, okay.
And I want to go back a little bit, a few years back to 1965, and he says, "In the spring of 1965, I visited the Navajo Indian Reservation in Arizona and met an old medicine woman. She was charming with intelligent dark eyes, and I asked her if she could tell anything about me simply by looking at me. Through an interpreter, she said yes, she could, and she dipped her hand into a box of flowers beside her and sprinkled yellow cornflowers over my head and shoulders, letting them fall around me. She said alcohol had played a very important part in my life and that I was about to be struck by lightning. As she said it, I felt a strange sensation streak through my nervous system. Both your parents are dead," she went on. "No," I said, "one of them is dead, my mother, but not my father." Within minutes, I was informed that there was a telephone call for me at the tribal office. It was one of my sisters calling to tell me my father had just died. Whoa. We both laughed, and I said, "And not a moment too soon." Brando,
wow.
So Brando had developed, so this is something that I maybe skipped over a little bit. I want to make sure I cover it. Brando, there's a Johnny Carson interview with Brando, I believe the year after or during the year that MLK was assassinated in 1968.
Oh, wow, okay.
And Brando, one thing about Brando, if you watch these, particularly the Cavett interview and this Carson interview, the Tonight Show, or the whatever it was at the time, he doesn't want to talk about movies, almost to the point of being a little obnoxious about it. Because of course that's what everybody wants to hear about. They want to hear about the movies, how what movie are you going to do next, etc. He wants to talk about Martin Luther King.
Wow. Okay.
And the Carson interview is quite ominous. He's saying we have one last chance to get this right, or else it's going to be helter skelter America.
Wow.
And these are very serious interviews, and his social consciousness was really there. He was not LARPing.
Right.
He got a bunch of actors together, a bunch of celebrities together, people in the industry, and got them to commit to contributing 1% of their income to, I think.
So they didn't just like record a video and put it on TikTok.
Right. Yeah,
they
they
sing
just
like
do
Imagine
a
or
dance
something.
number. Yeah, right. No. And he donated 10% of his income that year.
Wow.
I think to the Southern Poverty Law Center, I think.
Sure. Wow.
Or something like that. So he really put it on the line. And it's worth noting how much vitriol you could collect at that time.
Well, that wasn't to do that then. Through rose-colored glasses, we think that's how everything was then, right? But like this resurgence, this emergence of this consciousness. But like when you did that, you weren't saying the same thing that Amazon was saying, or that Walmart was saying, or McDonald's was saying.
Yeah, there was no woke capital at that point.
Right, you were crossing the line. You were ruffling some feathers, and you ruffle some feathers now, but it's already the demographic you're not catering to anyway, so it doesn't matter, kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, so he's won Best Actor for The Godfather. He declines it, and in his stead, he sends a woman named Sasheen Littlefeather. Wow. And we're going to listen to that interview. Or not that interview, rather, that speech that she gave at the Oscars right now.
Okay.
I learned a great deal from a director named Ingmar Bergman. Often to be most eloquent is to be silent.
You're quite right. The film we've just seen has said it all. I think we should say that those nominated for the best performance by an actor are
Marlon Brando in The Godfather,
Michael Caine in Sleuth,
Laurence Olivier in Sleuth,
Peter O'Toole in The Ruling Class,
Paul Winfield in Sounder. The winner is Marlon Brando in The Godfather.
Accepting the award for Marlon Brando and The Godfather, Miss Sasheen Littlefeather.
Hello, my name is Sasheen Littlefeather. I'm Apache, and I'm president of the National Native American Affirmative Image Committee. I'm representing Marlon Brando this evening, and he has asked me to tell you in a very long speech, which I cannot share with you presently because of time, but I will be glad to share with the press afterwards, that he very regretfully cannot accept this very generous award. And the reasons for this being are the treatment of American Indians today by the film industry, and on television in movie reruns, and also with recent happenings at Wounded Knee. I beg at this time that I have not intruded upon this evening, and that we will, in the future, our hearts and our understandings will meet with love and generosity. Thank you on behalf of Marlon Brando.
Pretty heavy, huh?
Yeah, whoa.
Whoa, doggy.
Yeah, that's, you could feel the tension in the audience just from the moment they called her name. The for people who are able to watch it, one thing that doesn't come across in the audio is when they try to hand her the award, she puts up this hand, right? And it's like, uh-oh.
He told Brando that she wouldn't touch it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And yeah, her poise, there was a little bit of nerves there, but there was the emotion brimming, and yeah, that was intense.
It gives me chills a little bit, and you do feel like it's a different era from now, where that tends to be lip service now.
Yeah, it feels like
PR strategy.
It does. It
Yeah.
feels, and not that it always is, but it definitely feels that way.
Yeah.
And interesting to say, recent events at Wounded Knee. I mean, Wounded Knee happened. I just looked it up because I was curious about the year. I know it was kind of pretty late. Wounded Knee was in 1890. But this happened, this was basically 50 years ago. And it was 80 years, it was much closer in time. So it's interesting. You think about the change of consciousness about those sorts of things.
Yeah, it had to do with the American Indian movement. And there was an ongoing situation at Wounded Knee.
There was still,
South Dakota.
So there was
Yeah.
like a contemporary,
Right.
And what happened at Wounded Knee in 1973?
It was apparently under siege by U.S. military forces.
I'm not going to go too deep into this. I just didn't know about this. 200 Oglala Lakota activists and members of the American Indian movement seized control of a tiny town.
Yep.
And in the ensuing conflict, 2 Native activists lost their lives, and a federal agent was shot and paralyzed.
Yeah.
And that was in 73 when this award
Right.
would have been given. So, yeah.
Right. So quite an intense moment. And Brando, I think he really believed this. And
you would. I mean, you would have to. I mean, I realize it's the end of his FU years, but also at the same time,
Well, and now too, like, think about it though, Johnny. What are you rebelling against? What do you got?
What do you got?
And going back to his childhood and all of it. So,
well, and there's also a little bit of a parallel to the 3-hour tirade against his father, where it's like, it's in a position now where like, you guys can't, I'm going to represent this to you. I'm going to send this woman up here and she's going to say stuff, and every word she says is going to be true. And you can't say, there's no retort.
Right.
Really. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a fantastic point.
Yeah.
It's also wild too, that getting back into the filmography, another film was released that year called Last Tango in Paris, 72.
Same year.
Have you seen this?
I have not. No, I saw you tweet about it and I was like, oh yeah, I've heard that name and I've heard that it was good, but I've never seen it.
We're going to take a little detour into this because it's so little known, at least among people I've spoken to. People you've heard the name of it, but maybe you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
It begins with a couple of Francis Bacon stills, like still paintings.
Yeah.
And when I saw those, I knew, this is going to be, what is this? It's going to be interesting. And it got an X rating.
Okay.
Yeah. It cost, I think, $1.5 million to make, and it grossed close to $100 million with $36 million in 1973.
Then
alone.
how do we not talk about it?
Because it's about sex, and we were talking about America and sex earlier, weren't we, Brad?
Yeah.
So it was directed by a fellow named Bernardo Bertolucci, and the plot is about a character who Brando plays, whose wife has killed herself, and he is in Paris, just living as hedonistically as possible.
Okay.
And Bertolucci developed the film from his sexual fantasies. There is very famously an anal rape scene.
By Brando's character?
Brando's character.
Ooh.
Now, this was...
I'm sorry. How corpulent was Brando at this time?
This is still fit Brando.
Okay.
We're still a little fittish.
Yeah. He's not, he's an older man, so he's not going to look like he did in Streetcar. But
he's not super handsome Brando. It's Brando from the period of The Godfather.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Okay.
Well, Bertolucci... this film was so controversial and so exciting to people that tickets were going for like $100 a ticket. People were queuing for 2 hours in France to see it, where it was screened in 7 theaters. People were driving from Spain to go see the movie, and it just had all of this controversy. It was released in Italy, and it grossed $100,000 in 6 days. But then police seized all the copies, calling it self-serving pornography, and the director was put on trial for obscenity.
Wow.
He lost his civil rights for 5 years. He couldn't
The
vote
director?
for 5 years because of this movie.
Wow.
Yeah, he got a 4-month suspended sentence for this film. It's a very good film. It's hypnotic. And of course, it seems relatively tame now.
Yeah, yeah.
The scandalous thing from the film that still kind of shakes me is the rape scene where Schneider, the actress, obviously the rape is simulated.
Yeah.
But in a 2006 interview, she said that the scene was not in the script and that when they told her, she had a burst of anger. She threw everything. Nobody can force someone to do something not in the script, but she didn't know that I was too young. There's mixed stories here. Apparently it was in the script and she knew, but the controversy is around the fact that they actually kind of slathered her in butter.
Oh, God.
And they surprised her with the butter as lubricant. I mean, this is definitely well into Me Too territory here. Legitimately, what? You can't do this. Yeah. So she's saying here, they only told me about it before we had to film the scene, and I was so angry. I should have called my agent or had my lawyer come to the set because you can't force someone to do something that isn't in the script. But at the time, I didn't know that. Marlon said to me, Maria, don't worry, it's just a movie. But during the scene, even though what Marlon was doing wasn't real, I was crying real tears. I felt humiliated. Oh. And to be honest, I felt a little raped, both by Marlon and Bertolucci. After the scene, Marlon didn't console me or apologize. Thankfully, there was just one take.
Jeez. God. Whew.
Yeah, pretty rough. Good film though.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but it is a really strong artistic film. So mixed bag, maybe take it or leave it, but it is a striking film. It grossed a ton of money and it's an art film. It's pretty wild. And
that
the fact
art film makes that much money.
Yeah, that an art film made that much money, but also that he had The Godfather come out, and then the same year this movie comes out. Yeah. So
Brando's back, baby.
Brando is back big time. It's the 70s, and he's the Godfather. And
his agent kicked up his feet on the desk and lit up a cigar and said exactly that. Brando is back.
Yeah, we're gonna cash in. Absolutely. Well, so we're gonna keep on pressing on. There's a little bit more about this butter story that I maybe don't want to miss. But in the meantime, I think it's worth pausing to sort of hear from Brando himself when he talks about his relationship with women. Let me see here. Here's what he had to say. I have always been lucky with women. There have been many of them in my life, though I hardly ever spent more than a couple of minutes with any of them. I've had far too many affairs to think of myself as a normal, rational man. But somehow I always thought there must be someone out there. There was something. Huge alimony payments. And if not that, trouble enough for 50 men. With women, I've had what you might call a Rolodex life. I enjoy identifying and pushing the right emotional buttons of women, which usually means making them feel that they are of value to me and offering them security for themselves and their children. The less likely I was to seduce a woman, the more I wanted to succeed. Doing rude things to nuns was always a fantasy. In a hospital once I tried. Her name was Sister Raphael, and she was quite beautiful. She often came to my room to see how I was feeling, and because there was something unusually extroverted about her, I thought, somewhere in her, there's got to be a touch of the tart. So I tried and failed. I mean, he was a monster. Let's be clear. Yeah, we're again, this is the art of darkness. Yeah. So we get into the dark side of these artists.
Yeah.
I'm pretty committed to saying that we're dealing with some sort of a monstrous character here.
Right.
Very complicated. But
and
also
brilliant. And but monstrous, no doubt.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so it's around this time that Wally Cox dies. And there's an incredible story about this because they had been friends all through their lives. Mm-hmm. And of this, Brando says, in a lifetime of making friends, and I think this is a breaking point for Brando. Between Last Tango in Paris the renewed fame of The Godfather, and now Wally's death, we're heading toward a precipice. In a lifetime of making friends, none was ever closer or more important to me than Wally Cox. We'd been playmates in Evanston at 7 or 8, and we both moved to New York about the same time. He was making a living as a silversmith and craftsman of fine jewelry, but would entertain us with hilarious monologues. We resumed our friendship, and it lasted until he died in 1973. I'm not sure I will ever forgive Wally for dying. He was more than a friend. He was my brother, closer to me than any human being in my life except my sisters. We were born in the same part of the country, came from the same culture, shared the same values, and had the same sense of humor. Well, when he died, I felt I felt mystified and could not accept it. I took some things that belonged to him, including the pajamas in which he died, and saved them. Even now, I have conversations with him. I curse him, USOB, and chastise him for dying. I also laugh at things when I'm alone because I imagine that he is there laughing with me. Not a day goes by when I don't think of Wally. Sometimes I wander around my house, pick up one of the chestnut walking sticks we brought home from a woodland long ago, think of something funny he said and laugh. Then I swear at him because he was an alcoholic who didn't take care of himself and died from a massive heart attack.
Jeez.
Well, you want to talk about darkness and the dark side, It goes even deeper. He contested the ashes with Wally's widow.
Wow.
And snuck them out. He stole them. Yeah, right.
Huh.
So his widow chose Brando to spread the ashes in an area where Cox liked. Unbeknown to the widow, Brando kept the ashes, sometimes carrying them around with him and usually having them nearby.
Whoa.
He still had them when he died.
Wow. Kept Wally with that.
He kept
intense.
Yeah, he kept Wally with him all the way.
Yeah.
And this was a case of kind of the wild man and the mild man is what they say.
Well, it also, there's a, for us just talking about the fact that he's a monster. Well, he wasn't a sociopath, right?
No,
it was something else, right? He had a heart and he cared about people and things, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Wally himself was a comedian and an actor too.
Okay.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to diagnose Marlon Brando. I wouldn't even know where to go.
Right. Right.
He was in Tahiti when Wally died, and he started taking over. He at one of the wakes or the funeral, he said, "I was Wally's friend, nobody else." Like he was. I mean, it just was like really kind of almost obsessive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wild. So he held on to the ashes sort of against the widow's wishes, which pretty wild. Yeah. Well, so we have that happening.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna fast forward here, moving through the filmography. We're gonna have some more fun, interesting anecdotes. Then we're gonna get to some really dark things that happened in the 90s. We're still in the 70s, but we're gonna flash forward here. He makes the Missouri Breaks. That's released in 76. That's the film with
Jack Nicholson, right?
Jack Nicholson. Yeah, I think I might have said Nicholas early. Jack Nicholson. And it's just like, it's set in Montana where the Missouri River, there's a place called the Missouri Breaks. And it's just a bizarre kind of postmodern Western.
Oh, really? Okay.
The New York Times said that it was an out of control performance by Brando.
Is he flamboyant? Like, is it?
Yeah, he's using different accents in different scenes. He plays this assassin who. Okay. It's a really weird movie to watch. It's very, very strange. If it happens to be streaming and you put it on, just watch it because it's like, apparently, like there's a writer from The Guardian who said that the film has ripened over the years. It's gotten better, saying it was derided as kind of like a weird self-indulgent folly. But what they say is, today, its quieter passages resonate more satisfyingly. Well, its lunatic take on a decadent, dying frontier seems oddly appropriate. Perhaps for the last time, there is a whiff of method to Brando's madness. He plays his hired gun as a kind of cowboy Charles Manson, serene and demonic.
Okay, on that description, that sounds like worth a shot.
Yeah,
sure.
you're gonna watch it. It's nobody goes, wow, have you seen the Missouri Breaks? I mean, it's this movie where it's Marlon Brando, Jack Nicholson, Randy Quaid, Harry Dean Stanton. You go, this is gonna be great.
Okay.
Like when Harry Dean Stanton showed up, I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. And then you just watch it and you go,
okay, guys.
Yeah.
You could do that if you want, I guess.
What's going on here with the Missouri Breaks guys? I don't know. It's just strange. It's just a strange movie, and you sort of have the sense that maybe there were some drugs involved. It's hard to know what's going on. So I want to keep in the filmography here, so let me make sure I have it, because we're going to come up to one of the big ones, which of course is Apocalypse Now. Yeah, what a good movie that is.
Man,
You're talking about
incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Well, so he does the Missouri Breaks. He does Superman, which was a big deal at that point.
Yeah.
And he just banged them for all the money in the world that he could get his hands on. Just banging them for money at this point. Does a film called Rayoni. I don't even know what that is. And he does Apocalypse Now, which sort of was famously a difficult film to make. And he was another big part of it. They did not expect him to show up weighing what he did.
Yeah, he was like 50 pounds overweight, right?
Yeah. I mean, and it was
well, and he's supposed to be, having gone native in the jungle,
Yeah, right. Does it really work?
Right.
So I'm reading from The Independent here. They're already having problems, but worse, Brando hadn't learned his lines or done any preparation whatsoever for the role. So Coppola had to start from scratch with him.
Mm-hmm.
He had to bring him up to speed on what the thing was about and who the character was. So that's rough.
That is rough. Yeah.
That's not a good way to make a movie. And he shocked everybody when he arrived. He was 300 pounds. You couldn't see around him. And you're totally right. Coppola envisioned Kurtz as lean and hungry.
Right.
It was like, what the hell was he going to wear? There was no Green Beret uniform on Earth big enough. So, I mean, Dennis Hopper, the production was shut down for a week while Coppola read Brando the script out loud.
He couldn't even be bothered to read it, huh?
900 people in the jungle, cast and crew, just sat and waited. Then one day, Brando shaved his hair off and arrived at the idea of improvising his scenes and letting Coppola's camera capture whatever came out of his mouth. Wow. Self-conscious about his killer whale appearance, Brando also stipulated that he dress in black and for the most part be filmed in shadow.
Which worked really well.
It actually did.
Yeah,
it actually did. Yeah. And of
the
course,
dynamic, I mean, for folks who haven't seen it, the dynamic of this big bald head sort of merging in and out of shadow is kind of captivating, really.
It really is a great film. And again, this is another film that Brando is really only in sort of like the last passage of the film.
I mean, he probably has typed out, he probably has less than 10 pages of dialogue, 5 pages of dialogue, probably something like that. But they're great. I mean, for people who haven't seen it, to me, when we started doing this episode, one of the things that I've been hitting on Twitter is those bits where he's talking from Apocalypse Now, because I find them, I think they're great. Yeah, that's an acting masterclass to me. And it's funny that he barely knew the lines and he was probably improvising parts of it, and he's super overweight, and the casting almost doesn't make sense in a certain way, but knocks it out of the park.
Yeah, who better? And now, I mean, and this is one of his great talents, is that you can't really imagine anyone else in that part. It's just all there, and that's the movie, and totally incredible. He didn't get on with Hopper, because Hopper had that drink and drugs lifestyle, to the point where they had to be filmed separately on alternate nights.
Oh, really?
Hopper was not doing well. And, you know, at one point, this is a bit of an aside, and Dennis Hopper will be a good one to do.
Hopper's performance is great too in that film, though. Really, yeah.
Coppola came to Dennis Hopper and said, "What can I do to help you play this role?" And Dennis said, "About an ounce of cocaine." So
personalities in this.
Times were a little different, but maybe not that different.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I wonder what went on the set of The Joker.
Yeah, right.
Well, so we've got Apocalypse Now, and then he makes some more movies. He appears in The Freshman.
Okay. Yeah.
But after this, it's like we're sort of getting into a period of, it's kind of winding down here. Yeah. And he would only do 5 or 6 movies after this. And now we got to get into the last passage of his life and some of these things that happen to his children, because I think it's really important to, again, we're focusing on the darkness, and his story is one of these stories about his strained relationship with his parents and how this would almost come full circle. So let me just pull up what I need to do this. What do you think about Marlon Brando right now at this point, Brad? What impressions are you left with?
I mean, it's like he's got demons, and I understand that. The sex stuff is always like, to me, I almost feel worse about that than I do about the drugs, because you're potentially hurting people along the way in a more direct way than if you're just, shoving drugs into your system.
Yeah.
So there's part of me that's like, well, man, and there's the ego stuff is also hard for me to look past, just the fact that you're an egomaniac and you don't really care that your eccentricities and pickiness are affecting other people. You're making 900 people wait in the jungle. Or like, for some people, this is just like their livelihood. They're not trying, they don't have, and they don't get the opportunity to make everybody wait.
Right. You're the great friend of the Native American and of the working man and all the rest. And then in practice, you're acting like a complete lunatic and a diva.
Right.
But you still get a legendary performance.
Yeah, and that's the flip side, is that literally Kurt's, Marlon Brando's character, talking to is it Michael Douglas? Why am I thinking Kirk Douglas? It's not Kirk Douglas.
Sheen.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Martin Sheen. Yeah, I don't know. I mixed the Douglases up in the Sheen. The Douglas
that's all right.
Whatever. But though that interaction, that whole scene, once Sheen, this whole set of scenes, once Sheen gets up to where Kurtz is camped out, is one of my favorite moves in cinema. So, and it's because of Marlon Brando. So I got to give it to him.
Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah.
So one thing about Brando in the 90s that I think is really interesting is that he was friends with Michael Jackson.
I kind of remember this.
Yeah. So apparently Brando confronted Michael Jackson about the abuse allegations. And this was an interview that happened with prosecutors during the trial in 94. And Brando said, I had asked him if he was a virgin, and he just sort of laughed and giggled. Brando said, adding that Jackson was uncomfortable with the F word and was too embarrassed to speak openly about his sex life. So he grilled Jackson about the allegations. And Brando said, with this mode of behavior that's been going on, I think it's pretty reasonable to conclude that he may have had something to do with kids. My impression was that he didn't want to answer because he was frightened to answer me. So that's an interesting aside. It's kind of wild to think about this late Marlon Brando, if you can imagine him around the time of The Island of Dr. Moreau. Have you seen that film?
Yeah, I did years ago.
Not the greatest film ever made, kind of an odd one. Yeah.
Yeah, imagine that, and him and Michael Jackson being friends. It's hard to understand how they would even interact with each other. It's very yeah.
Oh, without a doubt. But I wonder if they may have had something in common in terms of their their eccentricity, but also the degree of their fame.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we need to talk about Christian Brando and Cheyenne Brando as we come to the end here. So there was an incident involving Christian and Cheyenne that would end up in something like a murder, and then ultimately Cheyenne's suicide. Jeez. So 1990, Christian Debbie Brando fatally shot Dag Drollett, the boyfriend of his half-sister Cheyenne, at his father's residence on Mulholland Drive in the Hollywood Hills. He ended up pleading manslaughter. So the way the story goes is that Cheyenne was accusing Dag of domestic violence, and Christian drinking, got quite angry,
took a shot at
and ended up shooting him, claimed that it was sort of, he went for the gun, something to that effect. And he ended up doing 5 years. I mean, he pleaded out to the voluntary manslaughter charge.
Yeah.
And it's tough. And this is, early life. Christian was shuttled between his mother and father. His parents became increasingly hostile and abusive toward one another. Oh. And there was a custody battle, 12-year custody battle. She was abusing drugs and alcohol. Marlon eventually won custody, who was 13. And at that time, Marlon described his son as a basket case of emotional disorder. Marlon was a distant father, spent little time with Christian, who was raised by nannies and servants, and he moved between Hollywood and Teddy Row, his father's private island. So can you imagine this lifestyle? I mean, Marlon continued to have relationships with multiple women, fathered numerous children. Christian said the family kept changing shape. I'd sit down at the breakfast table and say, "Who are you?"
Oh, geez.
I mean, it gets even deeper. In 1972, Brando was filming Last Tango in Paris, Christian was kidnapped by his mother, took him to school, brought him to a gang of hippie friends in Baja California, Mexico.
Wow.
Promised them $10,000 to hide Christian.
Wow.
And then she refused to pay, hid the boy. Marlon had to hire a bunch of detectives from an agency.
Go extract him.
Named The Investigators.
Oh, my God.
And, I think that's a good show title, Marlon and the Investigators. Yeah.
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 Jeez.
I mean, so
this poor kid.
His father would visit him in Washington State. During his teen years, he dropped out of high school and began drinking and using acid. He was an occasional actor. His father would visit him in Washington and purchased him a cabin where he practiced artistic welding. Okay. And then he would divide his time between Washington and the Hollywood Hills. So just an awful situation. The story about the killing is a few days before the incident, Drollett had flown in from Tahiti to Los Angeles to visit Cheyenne. Cheyenne was visiting her father along with her mother. Cheyenne would not get out of Tahiti very often.
Oh, okay.
Both were staying at Marlon's house. Brando had known the Drollett family for years. Christian had met Drollett for the first time several hours before he shot him to death.
No way. Wow.
So, I mean, Cheyenne told Christian Brando, that Drollett had been physically abusive, which may have been untrue. Christian Brando said to a reporter from the LA Times, she went off on this bizarre tangent. He was drunk. He confronted Drollett and he shot him.
Wow.
Did not intend to kill Drollett. I just wanted to scare him, he said. So let's talk about full circle.
Yeah.
You hate your father. Marlon hates Marlon Jr. hates Marlon Sr.
Yeah.
And now this is happening to your family.
Right. That all that pain is just getting passed on, generationally. Jeez.
Yeah, and worse. I mean, now your
Right.
son, you have all the money in the world, you own your private island.
Yeah.
But now your son,
You can't help him.
yeah.
In a way, like it's too late to help him. Yeah.
And it's only a few years later that Cheyenne Brando would end up in a terrible car accident. So she, after the trial, her mental health really started to decline.
Sure.
She kept going into rehab, psychiatric hospitals. She publicly accused her father of molesting her. He denied both, all the accusations. She was formally diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Oh gosh.
Became isolated, and there was an automobile accident and she was a model as well. She's beautiful, just absolutely gorgeous.
Sure. Yeah.
But she ended up in an automobile accident that disfigured her, and she had her ear was torn. She had a lot of damage. Of course, Marlon's paying for all the best plastic surgery, but it ends her modeling career.
Yeah.
And in April of '95, she hanged herself in Tahiti. And neither her father nor Christian were able to attend.
Jeez.
So 1995, that's going on in Marlon Brando's life. And that's right around the time that this autobiography that I've been reading from
comes out.
Okay. So none of that is really addressed. He's a little evasive about certain things in the book. Yeah.
Some of it either hasn't happened yet or he's still unpacking it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I mean,
jeez. So that's 1995.
Yeah.
Dr. Moreau has already happened, right?
Yeah. I mean, and we're coming to an end here.
Yeah.
There's a story here. It doesn't really necessarily seem appropriate, but he's talking about a 13-year affair he had with a Beverly Hills woman and her husband. He talks about her husband. He didn't have an affair with the husband, but she was married and he had an affair with a woman for 13 years.
Wow.
Just really, really funny. There's a story he's telling here about sneaking in at night and then the husband is home and how mortified he was. Just an incredible character. And not at this point, I don't think he's not gonna learn anything.
No, I mean,
Yeah. And if you want a sense of where Marlon is at the end of his life, watch the Connie Chung interview and watch the interview with Larry King.
Okay. Yeah.
So I just want to wind down here. Yeah. We're getting into the late 90s, and that interview with Larry King is really good. They sing a number. They do a little ditty.
Oh, together?
Yeah, together. Brando kisses him on the lips at one point.
Okay.
And Larry King really makes a point about Brando. There's an interview with King after Brando passes away, and one of the lines that King says is, "There's nothing PR about him." Right? Mm-hmm. And about the theater, Brando didn't miss it. It's 3 hours of blood, sweat, and tears every night.
Yeah.
And you get bored.
Right.
You get bored. But I love that idea of Brando's house not having a single artifact that would indicate he's an actor.
Yeah. No movie posters, no awards,
No, he's like, King said, I didn't even know where the Oscars were. And Brando himself said, I don't know, I think my secretary has them.
Right.
Right? Can you even imagine?
Yeah. No PR, no.
Yeah, just out there, right in your face for you, and there he is.
Yeah.
Well, so we're coming to the end here, and just want to get exactly the year and the time.
Yeah.
Such an interesting character. There was even a little controversy on Larry King around a comment that he made about Jews in Hollywood and sort of hoping that they would maybe be a little more sympathetic to certain causes. And Larry King defended him, and I believe Larry King is Jewish, and said, "You're not." Marlon Brando was not an anti-Semite or a bigot. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you can accuse him of a lot of things, but that's
we definitely can accuse him of a lot of things. Well, so it was on July 1st of 2004, so well into our lifetime. He saw the invasion. Of
I remember it happening.
Died. He was 80 years old. He died of respiratory failure from pulmonary fibrosis with congestive heart failure. So the trifecta at the UCLA Medical Center. Cause of death was initially withheld. He had diabetes and liver cancer.
Jeez.
Shortly before his death, and despite needing an oxygen mask to breathe, he recorded his voice to appear in The Godfather, the game, once again as Don Vito Corleone.
Really?
However, Brando recorded only one line due to his health, and an impersonator was hired to finish the lines. That's cool, though. It's really cool.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
God, you wouldn't think he would be willing to do that. That's really
yeah. If he had lived another 10 years, maybe he would have been doing. Maybe he would have done more voice over for the games. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then you don't have to show up anywhere. Right?
Well, this is really, really sweet. So Brando was cremated, and his ashes were put in with those of his good friend Wally Cox and another longtime friend Sam Gilman. They were scattered in Tahiti and partly in Death Valley.
Okay.
So. Yeah, that's Marlon Brando. And here's a little bit from the end of the autobiography. I can draw no conclusions about my life because it is a continually evolving and unfolding process. This is him in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what is next. I am more surprised at how I turned out than I am about anything else. I don't ever remember trying to be successful. It just happened. I was only trying to survive, much like a newly fertilized egg. I look now at some of the things I've done in life with astonishment. 50 years ago, at a party at my home, I climbed out the window of my apartment in New York and clung to a balustrade 11 stories above 72nd Street as a joke. I can't imagine myself ever having done that. I have difficulty reconciling the boy I was then with the man I am now. Mm-hmm. I suppose the story of my life is a search for love. But more than that, I have been looking for a way to repair myself from the damages I suffered early on and to define my obligations, if I had any, to myself and my species. Who am I? What should I do with my life? Though I haven't found answers, it's been a painful odyssey dappled with moments of joy and laughter. In one of my letters from Shattuck, the military academy, I told my parents, in a play written by Sophocles, the Antigone, there are lines that say, "Let be the future, mind the present need, and leave the rest to whom the rest concerns. Present tasks claim our care, the ordering of the future rests where it should rest." These words written 2,000 years ago are just as applicable today as they were then. It seems incomprehensible that through the 15,000 years since our species came into being, we have not evolved. Yeah.
Huh.
So also a big thinker.
Yeah.
It's a big thinker. He was wrestling. He was a cosmic mind. He was wrestling with some very heavy, very big things.
Oh, I mean, you're talking about your debt to the species, man. There's, for sure.
And that is the life, the strange, monstrous, very sexually promiscuous life of Marlon Brando.
That was great, man. You took us on quite a ride. So yeah, I appreciate all the work you put into that and tying that together. And man, I mean, in some ways, what a man, what a character. Yeah.
What a monster too.
Yeah.
A monster.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
the audacity of a man. I mean, and it reminds me of the musician, Junior Kimbrough.
Yeah.
But all his children were kind of local, weren't they?
Yeah, they were around. Yeah,
they were around.
They were in the zip code.
And so you have Marlon Brando, just this audacity to just bang, and we're not worried about children. We're going to have more children. Don't worry, I'll set you up with a house. And just I get the craziness of that, the strangeness of that, but also the being above it all, and probably too much fame too quickly.
Yeah.
All the guardrails are off, and nobody's going to stop you because you played Stanley Kowalski in Streetcar.
Right. Yeah, no one was ever going to tell you. No one ever really told him no, right? Except that one nun. God bless her.
He would talk about, God bless that one nun, the one that got away.
Right.
I mean, but what an awful thing to try and seduce a nun. What a strange acting out and bizarre fixation. I think sex was drugs for
It
Brando.
seems like it. Yeah, it seems like it's pathological. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. There's a story he tells about in the book about his rage. How there was this anger under him, just under the surface, always there. And he was, I think maybe it might have been in New York or LA, but he was out one night and there was a singer who was not that good looking and was kind of mediocre, but she was up there trying. And apparently some fellas at the other table were talking smack and mocking her. And he got so angry. And then one of them, recognizing him, tapped him on the shoulder, and he flew into a rage and said, "If you want to live, never touch me again."
Okay.
So force. Right. And do you really want Colonel Kurtz or Vito Corleone coming down on you? I don't think so.
No. Yeah, absolutely. He had that power. And that's why those roles worked, right? It's because he did have that power. You believed it because it was there.
Yeah, right. There's a reality to it. And there's this strange parabolic arc to his, I don't even know what you would call it, but it's kind of like rhythmic arc to his career where he was the young, sexy heartthrob. Then he has the box office dud, comes back all corpulent and weird, right? Makes like an X-rated movie the same year he makes The Godfather.
Right.
And what a comeback. And he couldn't do it again in the 90s. It was sort of over.
It's kind of too late. Yeah.
I mean, again, I really can't think of a bigger comeback than, I mean, we were talking about Johnny Cash and his comeback. This is a comparable level of resurrection from that 10-year period. Yeah.
His most memorable roles are like right at the end and right at the beginning of his career. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I mean, Apocalypse Now, Goodfellas, Godfather. And then, Streetcar. Those are probably his three most memorable roles. So that's
On the Waterfront.
That's wild. Yeah. On the Waterfront. Right.
Well, Brad, what do you think Marlon would be doing now if he was around? What do you think?
See, I don't think he'd be acting. This is one guy I feel like he's not doing the thing that he was known for anymore. He's sitting in Tahiti. He's got a hot little Tahitian girlfriend. He's,
he could just be doing VO for video games too. I mean, he just
right. Maybe that was perfect for him, man. It's like you don't have to go anywhere. You don't got to like put up with all that much. He
crossed over from theater to film. Yeah, redefined film acting, redefined stage acting, helped redefine stage acting, redefined film acting, and so who knows what he'd be doing. Yeah. He loved money. He had a lot of kids, and say what you want about him. We definitely got into some dark stuff. You can cancel him if you want. Never watch The Godfather again if you want.
But that's your loss.
That's on whatever. Make sure you tell us on Twitter so we know how virtuous you are.
Right.
But he did look after the kids, at least materially. But the tragedy of those two children, and Christian wouldn't live very long. He died quite young, and that's tragic. You got to be there as much as you can for your kids. And no matter what, sure. Even if you're a god of an actor, there's really, it is your responsibility. Yeah. Amen. I'll draw the line there. All right. Hey, if you like what you're hearing, find us on Twitter. It's at Art of Dark Pod. At Art of Dark Pod. Brad's been manning that. That's fun.
Holler at us.
He posts fun, interesting characters. We want to hear who you want us to do. We really enjoy it. And that's always fun. We also have a Patreon where we do After Dark episodes that are an extra 20 or 30 minutes. So we're going to do that right now. So if you want to subscribe to the Patreon, that is at patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod. And we are at Art of Darkness or artofdarkpod.com. It's always Art of Dark Pod.
Yeah, and on iTunes and Google Play and Spotify and all of those. So subscribe. That's cool for us.
And if you don't want to chuck us a little money, just at the very least give a 5-star review.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So Brad, we're going to reconnect and deconstruct what the heck just happened. And
absolutely, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, all right, man.
All right.
The horror.
The horror.
The horror.
Stella! Hey! Stella!
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. All right, I'm gonna give it a try though.